are here. Silent. Yeah, silent. Please make your faces appear. We are going to start. Please, where are you? Professor Gokhale? Oh,
yes.
Great to see you. Great to see you.
Yeah.
After 1 year.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And where are others? Professor
Yes,
Madhumita?
Madhumita has joined, and I have just called Meenal Katarnikar, and she is joining. And I will also call Kuntala. Actually, they are a little late, I think.
Yeah.
So, I'm here. Professor Gokhale, I'm here.
Professor
Nair?
Namaste.
Glad to see you.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Well,
nice to
let us start. Let us
Victoria,
start.
after such a long time.
Yeah. Hi, Madhumita. I am very happy to see all of you. Yes. So let us start. It's given me a really great pleasure to welcome you all to the second annual international conference entitled Asian Philosophies, History, Methodology, Intercultural Approach. We are having now participants join us from different parts of India, and I'm particularly delighted to see some very dear familiar faces alongside with our first-time attendees. First and foremost, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to Professor Pradeep Gokhale from Pune University, who is an Indian member of our organizing committee and whose tireless efforts have made possible our two Indian-Russian panels. Now let us work through today's agenda. As you know, we have a roundtable today entitled Indian Cognitive Taxonomies and Comparative Perspective. And we have 6 speakers in the following order. First, Professor Madhumita Chattopadhyay, then Professor Shrikala Nair, then Professor Meenal Katarnikar, fourth, Professor Kuntala Bhattacharya, fifth is me, and sixth is my Russian student and colleague, Lev Titlin. Let us turn to the timing problem. Here's how we have structured our 4-hour session. We'll begin with individual presentations, allocating 30 minutes to each speaker. And I kindly ask each presenter to aim for a 25-minute presentation, leaving 5 minutes for immediate questions. Dear speakers, please note that my colleague, Oleg, gives a very gentle signal when you have 5 minutes left. I mean, left of your speaking time. And I think that this will help you to wrap up your main points smoothly. After all presentations are completed, we'll dedicate the final hour to our open discussion. Does the schedule work for everyone? Yes or no? Give me some sign.
Yes, perfect.
Yes, it's perfect. Great. So let us begin. I am very delighted to give the floor to my old friend and colleague, Professor Madhumita Chattopadhyay. Welcome. Do you have a presentation or a PowerPoint presentation, Madhumita?
Yes, I am sharing the screen.
Okay. Okay, please do it.
Can you see it?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Victoria, for inviting me to this workshop. And I really feel delighted to present something before this learned gathering. Look, I also thank Pradeep Professor Pradeep Gokhale, who is not directly my teacher, but whom I consider to be one of the greatest teachers in my life. Because
Me too, me too.
because whatever I have learned about Osanga, Bosubandhu, and others, that is from Professor Gokhale. So I really thank him for the nice lectures which he delivered at different places and which gave us, those who are interested in Buddhism, insight into the development of Buddhist logic and epistemology. Since the time is short, I am directly entering into the topic of my discussion, which is paradigm shift in the taxonomy of the early Yogacara tradition. In the here, by early Yogacara, I really mean the philosophy of Maitreyanatha and Asanga. I shall confine myself not here to Maitreyanatha, but to Asanga's two works. In the history of Buddhist philosophical thought, a paradigm shift was noticed with the advent of Mahayana tradition. In the Theravada tradition, emphasis was given on the welfare of the individual himself through following the dharma and the vinaya and making people aware of the Pudgala Noiratmya only. On the contrary, in the Mahayana tradition, the welfare of all rather than that of the individual himself was considered to be the ultimate goal. At the same time, it was believed that what is necessary for this is not the knowledge of Pudgala Noiratmya, but of Dharma Noiratmya. In order to establish this notion of Dharma Noiratmya and defend it against the criticism of the opponents, the Mahayana thinkers from their very early stage relied mostly on logico-epistemological methodology, which later on developed in the form of a new school of Buddhist epistemology and logic under the influence of Dignaga Dharmakirti. And in this respect, the early Yogacara thinkers went a bit ahead than their counterpart, namely the Madhyamika thinkers, in relating logic, epistemology, ontology together with the soteriological goal. That is, for them, epistemology, logic, ontology, and soteriology were not isolated, but very much interlinked, and together they form a unitary whole. This kind of comprehensiveness can be observed in almost all the early texts of the Mahayana school, like the Mahayana Sutra Lankara, Madhyanta Vibhaga Karika, Yogachara Bhumi Shastra, Vigopti Matrata Siddhi, and others. For the sake of brevity of time, I will mainly confine myself to the discussion found in the text Tattartha Patala, which forms the fourth chapter of the text Bodhisattva Bhumi, and Tattadhikara chapter of the Mahayana Sutra Lankara. Both these texts were composed by Asanga. Chapter 6 of the Mahayana Sutra Lankara starts with the discussion about the nature and classification of the ultimate reality. Paramartha Lakshana Vibhaga. The statement of the nature of ultimate reality looks to be paradoxical, being full of opposite pairs. Namely, it is neither real nor unreal, neither in accordance with that nor in accordance with otherness. It is bereft of origination and destruction. It is also free from rise and fall. It is not purified, but it is purified. Such is the nature of the ultimate reality. No son, no cha asan, no tatha, no cha onnatha, no jayate, vyeti, no cha anavohiyate, no bordhate, napi vishuddhate, punor vishuddhate, tat paramartha lakshanam. This verse indicates that the ultimate reality is advaya or non-dual in character. It is different from all forms of duality. In this verse, 5 types of duality are mentioned. These are duality of reality, unreality, duality of that and not that, duality of origination and decay, duality of increase and decrease, duality of purity and impurity. These are actually different pairs, and the ultimate reality is different from all such pairs and dualities. Asanga distinguishes among 3 natures: imaginary, porikalpito, dependent or conventional nature, paratantra sabhava, and ultimate, parinishpanna sabhava. It is with reference to these 3 natures that the duality of Shat and Asat is to be understood. That consciousness alone exists is the fact about the true nature of, sorry, just a minute. About the true nature of reality. And so it is called parinishpanna. From the point of view of conceptual nature or the conventional nature, what we call the real is not real. When we have consciousness of yellow color does not exist apart from consciousness. Yellow is actually constructed by our conception. Hence, such consciousness is said to be of imaginary character. Such consciousness that is of yellow is dependent on the sense organs and past impressions. Hence, its nature is said to be dependent or paratantra. These 3 natures, namely the porikalpita, paratantra, and parinishpanna, are not identical. So, they cannot be regarded as the same. On the other hand, they are not separable from each other, because from the point of view of imaginary and dependent nature, consciousness is not regarded as real, but from the point of view of the ultimate nature, consciousness cannot be regarded as unreal. Hence, consciousness by itself is neither real nor unreal. No sat porikalpito paratantra lakshanabhyam, no cha asat parinishpanno lakshanam. Consciousness is paratantra or dependent, and it constructs its porikalpita or imaginary nature. The fact that consciousness is dependent on factors other than itself to be identified, the fact that consciousness needs to be dependent on factors other than itself in order to be regarded as consciousness of so and so, it constitutes its parinishpanno or the ultimate nature. This non-dual consciousness of the ultimate reality is dharma dhatu, according to the Yogacara thinkers. It is identical with the dharmakaya advocated in the Trikaya theory of the Buddhists. Such dharma dhatu is not created by causes and conditions. Hence, it does not come into existence, and consequently, any question regarding its destruction does not arise. Such dharma dhatu is devoid of rise and decline. Impurities being coterminous with the occurrence of defilements in the mind, purity can occur with the removal of such defilements. This indicates that impurities or defilements, molas, are external to mind. They come from outside. In other words, dharma dhatu in its intrinsic nature cannot be impure, and so no question of its being pure arises. At the stage of liberation, when purity of mind is spoken of, what is meant is that all the external, extrinsic, secondary impurities are removed. This pure mind is regarded as the paramartha or the ultimate reality. It constitutes the entire reality. In dharma dhatu, there is no awareness of duality between mind and object, as they are relative and dependent on each other. Having known through intellect that there is nothing beyond mind or consciousness, that neither the cognizer nor the cognized do exist, the wise remains in the ultimate truth, the dharma dhatu, in which there is no awareness of chitta and its object. This stage is the stage of penetration and realization and is devoid of the nature of duality. In the verse 8 of Mahajana Sutra Lankara, which I have quoted here, what is stated is that how the dharma dhatu becomes directly known. Having known through intellect that there is knowledge of the non-existence of the mind itself, in the absence of the grasper and the grasped, both, that is grahyoko and grajya, the wise stays in the dharma dhatu, which is patadgati, that is, in which there is no knowledge of the grahya and the grahoko. In the next verse, the next stage towards liberation is described, which is the path of cultivation. When non-conceptual knowledge is cultivated, a kind of transformation takes place in the basis itself, and transformation generates a sense of equanimity everywhere. Just as death removes poison, non-conceptual knowledge followed by equanimity towards all removes the different falsities stored in the mind from the beginningless past. In the chapter Tattartha Pariksha of the Mahayana Sutra Lankara, we get a vivid description of the different stages of knowledge which the Bodhisattva undergoes before attaining the stage of liberation. In the first stage, he has verbal knowledge of things. Things are not, namely that things are not changing. In the second stage, he realizes the unreality of things. he realizes that things like words are not real. When he realizes this, he remains in the Chittamatra stage. At that stage, the Dharmadhatu, the true nature of, just a minute. The Dharmadhatu, the true nature of things, becomes directly known, and it is realized that the true nature of things transcends all pairs of duality. Having known that things are only verbally constructed and remain only in the mind-only state where such words and things can appear, the Bodhisattva attains the second stage, which is the stage of Nirvedha Bhagyavastha. That is a stage which consists of penetration. He enters into pure consciousness by removing the false beliefs that things are real or the designating words are real. After the removal of such falsities, the Bodhisattva has direct realization of the Dharmadhatu, a stage in which there is the absence of duality of the cognizer and the cognized. This is known as the Darshana Margavastha. Thus, the second stage consists of two dimensions, Nirvedha Bhagyavastha and Darshana Margavastha. In this transition from the stage of verbal thinking with oneself to a higher stage of understanding the true nature of things amounting to dharma noiratma, what is needed is not only acquisition of knowledge, that is jnana sambhara, but also accumulation of virtues, punya sambhara. When the wise attains this ultimate knowledge, he becomes well established in the dharmas or the teachings of the Buddha. The Bodhisattva applies his intellect to the Dharma Dhatu, which has consolidated Dharma as its object. And having applied that awareness, he transcends the paramitas and attains the 10th stage, which is known as the Dharma Megha Bhumi. This is a stage of spontaneous wisdom, Jnana Paramita, a stage which is nothing but that of Buddhahood. A proper look at this chapter of the Mahajana Sutra Lankara shows that here Asanga first has tried to find out the nature of reality, and this nature of reality gets unfolded as the individual advances from the stage of the ordinary person to the stage of the Bodhisattva. In the process of this transition, he acquires not only wisdom, prajna, but also all other virtues, paramita, like generosity, patience, vigor, strength, resolution, etc. It may be noted that in texts like Dashabhumika Shastra and Madhyamaka Avatara, there is description of the 10 stages, Dashabhumi, namely Pramudita, Bimala, Prabhakari, Ochishmati, Sudurjaya, Abhimukhi, Durangama, Achala, Sadhuvati, and Dharmamegha. Corresponding to each of these stages, emphasis has been given on the cultivation of one particular quality or paramita. The tattva or reality, according to Asanga, is said to have two complementary facets. One facet is the bhutata, or the being of phenomena, pertaining to the way these truly are, jathabhat bhavikata, and the other is their entirety, sarvata, pertaining to their extent of being, yavat bhavikata. Such bhutata and sarvata are to be regarded as constituting the tattva or reality of all the dharmas. Such a nature of reality is apprehended in 4 different ways depending on the ability or potentiality of the individual. First, reality may denote what is commonly accepted in the world, namely the way in which language conventionally refers to objects, like saying, this is earth and not fire. The general structure of such knowledge is, this is so and not that. Secondly, reality may denote that which is established through reliable sources of knowledge, that is pramana, consisting of direct perception, inference, and verbal testimony. Third, reality can be understood as that which is perceived by the knowledge achieved through the elimination of uplifting hindrances, klesha varana vishuddhi jnana. Those who have eliminated not only the uplifting hindrances, but also cognitive hindrances are the awakened bodhisattvas and buddhas. By realizing the non-substantiality of phenomena, dharma noiratma, they have achieved full knowledge of the ultimate reality, namely the inexpressible nature of all phenomena, sarva dharmanam nirovilapota. These 4 varieties of knowledge actually refer to the 4 grades of human conduct or human capacities. The first refers to the knowledge of common people who merely rely on conventions or practices coming through several generations or parampara and on their own imagination or conceptual thinking. This is regarded as the common understanding, lokaprasiddha, and not enlightened understanding. In the Lankavatara Sutra, it is said that such knowledge cannot be true knowledge. The second variety consists of such knowledge which is proved or established through critical examination of the nature of reality on the basis of the pramanas. Being established through pramanas, the object of such knowledge becomes well-known, suvidita, and certain, sunishchita. The first variety belongs to that of the common people, while the second variety belongs to the scholarly persons, panditas. Thus, the first 2 varieties form the ordinary form of knowledge. The bhumi here is pratibhaniki, that is of individual intuition. The third variety belongs to the spiritually advanced individuals, namely the Sravakas and the Prakteka Buddhas, who are the Aryas. These Aryas, obtaining knowledge of the 4 noble truths and knowledge about the changing character and essencelessness of all entities, are able to free themselves from all forms of defilements. The knowledge acquired by them has purified their own mind and does not allow it to get contaminated anymore. However, this variety of knowledge is not the ultimate one which is aimed at by the Mahayana thinkers, because it is limited to the knowledge of Pudgala Noiratma only, and hence is operative in the removal of Klesha Varanas. Higher than all these varieties is the knowledge achieved by those who have eliminated both the Klesha Varana and the Gya Varana, the cognitive hindrances. Such knowledge is attainable by the awakened bodhisattvas and buddhas. By realizing the insubstantiality of phenomena, they attain the full knowledge of the ultimate reality, namely the inexpressible nature of all phenomena, not thinking of the thing as such, bostu matro, and its being as such, tathota matro, as being two separate entities, the Bodhisattva sees that all phenomena are same in nature. Engaging with such ultimate reality, he sees with progga or insight that all entities are, he sees with progga or insight all the entities in their true nature and their being just the same as suchness, tathota. Looking impartially at everything and being even-minded, the Bodhisattva attains supreme equanimity, on the basis of which he gets engaged in the development of skillfulness of all branches of learning. The more he attains special type of knowledge to a greater extent, his mind, through understanding more and more, becomes equanimous to the manifestation of the disciplinary transgressions resulting from the primary and secondary defilements of blaming others, disputes, and utterance of incoherent speeches.
Professor,
there is-
5 minutes left.
Okay. As there is more progress in the cultivation of his virtues, the more he attempts to conceal his excellence. He trains restraint in body and speech to develop natural aversion to evil and and consequently obtain a naturally good and virtuous character. He becomes forbearing to all the harms and acts of hostility done by others to him. He trains to develop forgiveness so that he becomes slow in anger, mondo krodhota, and does not inflict harms upon others. He is intent upon mastering all the branches of learning and developing skill to dispel the doubts in other sentient beings and confer benefits to them, and also acquire the cause of omniscience for himself. He has his mind internally fixed and is well equipped. He trains for the sake of mental stability in order to refine the four Buddhist virtues, to develop mastery over the 5 forms of supernatural knowledge, avijja, in order to facilitate the activities of the sentient being, and for removing defilements arising out of mastery of all skillfulness. In this explanation, there is first a classification of knowledge into 2 levels, conventional or mundane and pure. Then there is analysis of reality into existence and non-existence, bhavo and abhavo, that which is free from being or existence, as described earlier, is the object of reality and falls within the characteristic of all dharmas. Such reality is non-dual. About such reality, the knowledge of the blessed Buddhas is to be regarded as absolutely pure. On the other hand, the knowledge of the Bodhisattvas is to be known as influenced by the path of training. In this way, in the first few sections of the text, the discussion that is found is mainly epistemological in nature. Then there is discussion on what there is in reality, which is identified as shunyata, and this shunyata is understood in a way different from that of the Madhyamika thinker Nagarjuna. Thus, in Asanga, epistemology gets related to ontology. Proper realization of the true nature of shunyata enables one to attain the highest stage. Progress towards the highest stage brings about a change in his psychic level, enabling him to look upon the other worldly beings with a compassionate mind and work for their betterment. In this way, the early texts of the Yogacara thinkers reveal that epistemology, ontology, and soteriology are interrelated, and knowledge of such interrelatedness is the stepping stone for realization of the Dharma Noiratma, the ultimate realization in the Mahayana tradition. This is the novelty which was not noticeable in the earlier works of the Theravada and even of the Madhyamika school. Herein lies the speciality of Asanga to bring in the comprehensiveness in the Buddhist thinking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madhumita, for such a insightful, profound presentation of the Buddhist classificatory thinking in Asanga. I'm really very, very impressed. And I ask the audience to give to present some brief queries or questions or suggestions for this paper. Please, are there any? No questions? Professor Gokle, are you here?
Yes, I am here.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful talk. And I mean, personally, I have some issues with Yogacara as a whole, and not necessarily particularly with reference to this particular presentation, but the issue is that
Excuse me, just
yes,
just
am I audible?
formulate,
Sorry.
and then we will
Sorry.
discuss. Okay, discuss after the presentation of all papers. Just formulate your issue.
Yes. The issue is that in Yogacara, what we do is there are two stages. First, we say that the external objects are just constructed and they are not real. At the second level, we question the grahaka distinction, that is knower and knowable. And so ultimate nature of consciousness is just pure consciousness without any object. Now, if that is so, and that is identified with Buddha's knowledge, and Buddha is regarded as omniscient. So omniscience actually means knowledge of everything. So how these two ideas go together, that somebody is omniscient means he knows everything, but his knowledge is something which is without any object. This is my question.
Yes, you will answer later, Madhumita.
Yeah, okay.
I also have some query or some proposition. How do you think this early Yogacara integration of knowledge, of epistemology, ontology, and soteriology, which you developed in the paper, in your abstract, how all these influenced the later Buddhist philosophical developments, particularly in the works of Dignaga and Dharmakirti? This is my first question. And the second question is, in your analysis of the paradigm shift from Theravada to Mahayana, from early Mahayana to later Mahayana, what historical or social factors do you think contributed to this transformation in Buddhist thought? Are there any questions more? If not, then I am happy to give the floor to Professor Trikala Nair. Please. Where are you?
I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm just
Great.
trying to share the slide.
Yes, we see you. Oh, okay, thank you.
Can you see the slide?
Yes, 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 yes.
Yes. Is it partially visible or can you see it full? Can you see the slides perfect or?
Yes, we can see them.
Oh, thank you very much. So good morning to my Russian colleagues and good afternoon to the Indian colleagues. Are you saying something, ma'am? Can you hear me? Please answer.
Виктория Георгиевна, микрофон.
Yeah, I
Yes,
don't see
Dr.
the end of
Shrikala,
the
we can
phrases.
hear.
The end of the phrase on the right side.
Okay.
Perhaps, yes, I know how to tackle with this problem. I just put me down. Yeah, now it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Now it is perfect, but right, but I can't see the full thing. Oh no, I don't think I'll be able to show it. Wait a minute, please. Bear with me. What we can do? Bar cross here. Side bar cross here. The presentation model. Side slow. I can't read the whole thing. Okay. I'm sorry, I can't make the presentation proper, I think, because I can't read the whole thing. So I will stop sharing and then...
Dr. Shrikala?
Yes?
Dr. Shrikala?
Yes.
You are sharing the screen, right?
Yeah.
This is Meenal Katarnikar. You do
Yeah,
one thing.
Meenal.
Are you on your laptop?
Yeah.
Are you on your laptop?
Yeah.
Yeah, keep the PPT open.
I'm
And
doing that.
read it out from that PPT. We can see it here when you are sharing. So you will have to do manually on your screen separately.
Yeah.
And the slides that you will change, we will see them automatically here. Yeah. So you do it not here, but on your laptop in a separate file.
Okay, but then who will change the slides here? Okay, I will have to change on. Right. Okay, I'll do that. So friends, sorry for those initial troubles. The title of my presentation is Semiotics and Embodied Cognition, the Buddhist insights. In this presentation, I have taken up, in fact, 3 tasks, all equally challenging. First is to the first task is to speak about the transition from computational model prevalent in contemporary cognitive science to embodied model of cognition. And second, to speak about the Buddha's insights on embodied cognition. And the third is to examine how semiotics comes to play a role in it. We know that cognitive science in its first phase thrived with the computational theory of mind, where scholars like Jerry Ford argue that just as a computer takes up the inputs and processes it, employing its algorithmic patterns to provide the output, so too human cognitive apparatus processes cognition in a formal way. The three principles that are, this is not moving. The three principles that are central to the computational theory of mind are: first, the information conveyed by a mental representation is autonomous and is non-dependent on the sensory motor system. Second, that knowledge is represented propositionally and meaning emerges from the relations among the constituent symbols. And third, the internal representations instruct the motor system, which is essentially separate from the cognitive processing factors that takes up the action as per the cognitive output. Now, among the merits credited to this classical model, that is the computational theory of model, are: first, it provides a perfect method to deal with the abstract and theoretical notions. And we all know that the abstract theories are most important as far as cognitives are concerned. And second, the AI technologists and the transhumanists find it suitable, as they, with this theory in place, can speak about a disembodied intelligence. However, CTM's failure to explain the symbol processing method, how the symbols are really being processed, and second, along with the issue of symbol grounding problem, we know that symbols are artificial symbols, and where these artificial symbols are grounded and on what basis these symbols have been created. This is the symbol grounding problem, coupled with its over assertion on concepts, totally sidelining sensing and acting, all led to its replacement by the embodied model. The embodied model conceived cognition not as something formal or mechanic, but rather dynamic, distributed in space and time, and is produced by an interaction of brain, the rest of the body, and the environment. The vision is that our cognition is the outcome of an ongoing interaction between an organism and its physical and cultural environments. For instance, regarding our understanding of a chair, apart from our visual experience of chairs and our motor programs for using them, it also includes other possibilities of apprehending it. How do we apprehend a chair other than the physical and the motor apparatus? Either in terms of, we may apprehend it either in terms of one's preferences or as a symbol of power. You know, you hold a chair, which means you are holding a chair in philosophy, that is chair holding a power, or other cultural factors, or even one's religious preferences. In other words, every objectable experience is a story the self creates, understands, and enjoys. Viewed thus, one's cognition includes a kind of a skill reconstructing the idiosyncratic representations tailored to the current needs of the situated actions. The above-mentioned shift towards the body was initiated by a group of thinkers called post-cognitivists, who proclaim that body by itself is a cognitive agency. The body knows how to act. For instance, while riding a bicycle, all of us know that while riding a bicycle, we don't need to conceive or have any conceptual deliberations how to ride the bicycle. The body seems to be knowing it. A better example is, the ball juggling. There is an experiment that was conducted where a group of people were trained how to juggle with the ball, and at the close of the workshop, which extended for almost 2 weeks, all of them learned how to juggle the ball, and all of them alike reported that they have learned how to juggle with the ball when they could stop conceptualizing over it. So the call is to avoid the classical empiricist error of assuming that all experience begins with the atomistic sense impressions that have to be synthesized into unified perceptual judgments. Contrast this erroneous view with the fact that what we actually experience are the wholes, unified situations within which we experience the individual objects, qualities, and events through the selective discriminations by which we individuate aspects of our experience. Even in our common cognitive habits, there are evidences of bodily participation. For instance, see, you see me, I'm giving gestures. So gesturing is something very common while we speak. And what we are trying to do when we gesture. Anyway, we are aware that we are using language. Why is it that this gesturing comes in addition to the speech? A close introspection would reveal that gesturing is an attempt to augment the canvas of one's articulation. There is more to be discussed, I mean, probably at the time of discussion. Also, what we perceive is determined by what we do in order to perceive. It is not the case that there is something out there in the world and we have a representational performance in cognizing. On the contrary, we seem to be doing something to know it, not solely. And it's not the case that there is a process that happens exclusively within the brain, which gives a representational knowledge. In the embodied model, we speak of 4 E's, where cognition has been conceived as embodied, inactive, extended, and embedded. A concrete evidence to establish that the cognition is indeed embodied, we have the famous example of the phantom limb, where the patients keep complaining that their amputated limb still cause pain. Also, here in this embodied notion, to perceive is to respond, to know is to act, a thesis which pronounces the enactment nature of cognition. For example, when one cognizes a small opening, his understanding of this is always it is in terms of his own bodily ability to slip through the opening. The cognition is also extended, is well proved by our obsession with our personal space. You all are aware that we have personal space. Personal space is an extended boundary of the self, and the body shows various forms of defense when it is invaded. Again, a little reflection on our behavioral pattern would reveal that our cognitive responses to the surrounding objects is always embedded in some particular situation. Again, imagine sitting in a chair. For example, when you try to sit on a chair, there is a pre-reflective correspondence between the body and the object, and the body moves almost spontaneously, just following the affordances provided by the situation. According to the type of the chair, you seem to be moving the body without the brain interfering. However, even embodied theory is not a happy story. All versions of embodied models suffer from 2 defects, that is insufficiency and incompleteness. Insufficient it is because they do not provide a full explanation of the concepts which they apply. It is as if they are trying to romance about cognition as being embodied, and nothing concrete and clear coming up with their theories. And they also appear incomplete because they do not seem to capture all that is encased in the abstract concepts. How this embodied version is trying to do with the abstract concept is still being debated. So these challenges to the embodied notion force us to search for a more generous theory. Generous, I mean more generous metaphysically, that can conceptually support embodied cognition. And my search ended up with the Vijnanavada school. And as all of you are by now aware, research is on to explore the insights of Vijnanavada school towards embodied cognition, at least at the initial stage. So this choice is made on the fact that this school shares most of the convictions of embodied model, such as lack of a continuing self, the phenomenal nature of cognition, marking abstract concepts as metaphysically inferior, defining perception as one causally efficacious, so on and so forth. And this engagement, it is presumed, will also help the embodied model theorists on the Western side to get over their limitations, which I have just cited above. Dharmakirti in Nyayabindu declares that there are only 2 knowable objects, vice the particular and the general. The former is revealed through perception and the latter through inference. Dvividham samyak jnanam pratyaksham anumanam cheti. So perception is fundamentally an immediate non-conceptual knowing of momentary particulars, which is naturalistic, where we get a taste of true reality. Since bodily sensation is considered to be a crucial part of perception, to cognize is to cognize with one's psychophysical apparatus as well, which suggests the embodied nature of cognition. Dharmakirti's definition of pratyaksha as kalpanavodham indicates their distaste towards the generality or the class conceptions, a characteristic feature of all embodied theorists. After the sensation, when we come towards the subsequent process of perceptual judgment, due to the kshanikatva of the objects, a correspondence with the first object sensed at the first moment seems ruled out. And hence the perceptual judgment actually refers to a similar object of the same class. Dharmottara says, Santana eva pratyakshasya prapaniyaha, kshanam na prapaniyam ityanena. Evidently, here the representation of the object is not in our brain, but in the environment, which clearly indicates the embedded nature of cognition. Further, the means for validation of this knowledge lies in its conduciveness, as you all know, ardhakriya karitva, which is variously called as pravrti samardhya or sambadi pravrti, which has been shared by Nyaya schools and others. So this ardhakriya karitva reveals the enacted nature of cognition. Dharmakirti pronounces that cognition, like any other action, aims at attaining the desirable and avoiding the undesirable. And as the embodied theorists envision, it is the agent's interaction with the world that determines the nature of the object. It is the desire, you all know the theories. It is the desire of the agent that determines the nature of the object. Note that Bauddhas here aid their Western counterparts by providing a strong metaphysical foundation for the embedded nature of cognition. That is, that things are by nature essenceless, the Anatmavada. Again, that cognition is extended as a fundamental notion in Vijnanavada. As Dharmakirti observes, awareness in ordinary parlance is necessarily intentional. And he very beautifully says, Dharmakirti, and had there not been the object at the other end, we would have been left with the experience of pure awareness itself, to which Madam has referred to earlier. Now to enter into the theme of the science. It has been observed that the use of science determines the depth of a civilization. Going by this standard, Indian civilization is very, very rich because almost all schools have extensively used science while philosophizing. Though in Upanishadic literature, we do not find much use of science, by the advent of Nyaya Sutra, we have terms like Linga, Nimitta, Lakshana, Sapnya, etc. being prominent. And scholars argue that it is Buddhism who has brought science to a significant role while philosophizing. In Buddhist philosophy, the notion of science has been used consistently to indicate how empirical cognitions, which is embodied, mostly take us away from truth. So the role of science is to take us, use the pramana and take us away from the truth. Interestingly, the play of science transcends the boundaries of epistemology and linguistics and extends to ontology as well. We have seen earlier, Madam has beautifully pronounced how the epistemology, ontology, and soteriology all are put in one single basket. Exactly, that is precisely how Bauddhas view reality. We have seen that after sensation, when perceptual process proceeds to judgment, we have the first employment of sign, that is a linguistic sign. Note that Indian thinkers have a basic aversion towards arbitrary signs. Unlike in the Greek tradition, here the arbitrary signs are not being used. We use arbitrary signs only in the semantic context. Once the object gets named and we conceive it through our conceptual categories, we begin our journey by which we are systematically distanced from reality. As we proceed using signs more and more, we have been systematically getting distanced from reality. And when it comes to Anumana, Dharmottara says the very process of Anumana gets started with one's grasp of a sign. It has been said, a definition, Linga Grahana Sambandha Smaranasya Paschad Manam Anumanam. In fact, they conceive inference as twice distanced from reality. Why twice? First, since the knowledge it procures is arrived at through an inference, because Dhuma is being conceived as as a sign, which itself is a linguistic symbol. So the word Dhuma is also a linguistic symbol, and therefore there is the use of sign twice, and therefore we are removed twice away from reality. The sign playing a double role. The more the sign, the further you are from truth, is the theory. Since the school was aware of the crucial role played by science in cognition, they undertook a serious study on it. In fact, Dinaga converts the whole of inference as one sign-centered. His famous Trairupya Hedu, the triple requirement for a valid sign, that is Kevalanyavaya, Kevalavyatireki, and Anvaya Vyatireki, polishes the inferential sign to such an extent that many think that the school with this initiates an Indian philosophy of science. Professor Sarukai speaks about it. Subsequently, he also redefined Vyapti relation as Vyabhijari Rahita Sahachari Sambandha, thus incorporating a defeasibility condition into the Vyapti relation. And he presumes that with these two strictures, on the Trairupya Hedu and on the other, we have the Vyapti redefined. So with this, he hopes that he has really sharpened the inductive tool to such an extent that he could raise the probability bar to great heights, almost touching certainty. That the symbolic representation of our cognition takes us away from reality and leads us to a world of make-believes is not something initiated by the Swatantra school. As early as ornament school, the Mahayana Alankara has already been referred here, have made it clear that there is no distinction between the perceiving subject and the perceived object. She has beautifully spoken about it. That is Vijnapti Matrata Siddhi. So the deluded state makes man commit himself to science. This is the theory. The deluded state makes man commit himself to science that systematically distances himself from reality, and consequentially one gets drowned in sorrow. Thus, semiosis becomes pivotal in Buddhist ontology to explain the phenomenal cognition. Without it, we cannot meaningfully speak of anything in the world, be it the perceptual judgment, inference, or even linguistic communication. Now, to talk about linguistic communication, Dharmakirti says that linguistic communication is exactly like inference, where there is a double use of signs, and therefore it has been doubly removed from reality, because linguistic usage is one kind of sign, and then the term itself is a sign. A culmination of this ontological truth is in fixing signlessness as the goal of life. Buddhists of all streams speak about progressive ways in which science can steadily be conceptually lightened and finally reach to a point where nothing remains as the other to represent. Madhumita ji has spoken about it. In fact, there is a semiotic interpretation of nirvana where signlessness has been depicted as one entry point to nirvana. The popular Trisvabhava of early Yogacara school, which she has spoken about, that is the three types of reality, Parikalpita, Paratantra, and Parinishpanna, indicates this. The Parikalpita, she has said, is born of imagined mental worldly experience in terms of language, and the Paratantra Swabhava refers to the empirical experience of a world, where the experience is in terms of the object aspect and the subject aspect. Note that when we come from Parikalpita to Paratantra, there is a reduction of the usage of sign, and therefore we are significantly moving towards the reality, since the trichotomy of name-object perception gets reduced to the dichotomy of representation and consciousness. The third and the final type of sign is the perfected signifier, that is Parinishpanna. Note that the very analysis on the function of signs and semiotic process is to lead humanity towards this goal. What is the goal? To put an end to this process of signifying. When the seizing on things come to an end, the ultimate emptiness of all phenomena would prevail. The text offers two specific characteristics of the perfected signifier. She has spoken a variety of it. I'll just mention two. First, a perfected signifier indicates the non-existence of the imagined nature of phenomena and parallelly indicates what actually exists, that is reality itself. All this she has mentioned. Second, that it is not characterized by conceptual discrimination because it is free from conceptual proliferation with which we have been committed to. According to the ornament, the perfected signifier is so complete that his thought, his consciousness entirely encompasses that which it signifies. Here, we should note that we are no longer dealing with a conventional conception of a sign that it could designate to some distinct object. Rather, here we have some sort of ultimate conception of an unlimited sign, one whose contours are not drawn where the signifier ends and the signified begins. The perfected signifier thus arrives at the singularity of immediacy. This transformation is specifically linked to the end of semiotic process, the signlessness, animikta. This highest awakening entails the end of semiosis. Recently, Buddha semiotics has come to the center stage across the world, and literature on how Buddhists have effectively put an end to the issue of unlimited semiosis, that is, the infinity involved in it, indicated by Charles Sanders Peirce, has caused an oriental shift to the science of semiotics. According to Peirce, 3 elements are necessary for semiosis to occur: sign, object, and the interpretant. Regarding this last element, that is interpretant, Peirce states the interpretant is nothing but another representation to which the torch of truth is handed along. And as a representation, it has its interpretant again, and it goes on ad infinitum, giving an infinite series. Now, how to end this infinite series? While many argue that Buddhists have put an end to the unlimited semiosis referred in Peirce's analysis, how they achieved this is something debated. Do they achieve it by bringing in ultimate perfection of science, or they accomplish it by the very cessation of science? Are two positions still debated. If we choose to go by the Mahayana Sutralankara, these two possibilities are non-different. That they perfect the science is one, and they have a cessation of science, both seem to merge. Thus, the ultimate end of semiosis has been defined by Buddhists in terms of the soteriological goal, where semiosis has been raised to the realm of religious praxis. To experience the phenomenal is to engage science. To embrace nirvana, we must transcend semiosis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, extraordinary, for your brilliant presentation of how an intercultural approach may work in practice. Because you use the Western perspective on science, semiosis, and you have shown how it could help to classify on these points, from this angle, the entirety of Indian epistemological theories. Am I right?
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a perfect intercultural presentation, and it has shown that sometimes we may use notions or concepts from Western side to enlighten some aspects of Indian tradition, and vice versa. We can use some Indian important terms or concepts to find out how things are going in Western tradition from this angle. Well, now I invite our audience to question, to make questions, to make brief comments for 5 minutes. Thank you. Welcome. Professor Stepanyans, do you hear me? Professor Stepanyans is a great promoter of intercultural philosophy in the world and in our country. Marietta Tigranna, please say something to us.
No, he is.
Yeah.
He's muted, I think. He's muted.
She's muted, but she may, well, perhaps nobody can help her to unmute her status. But I assure you that all of us who are considered themselves intercultural philosophers are very happy with your presentation. And as for me, I also wrote a paper on perceptual judgment in Dignagas Romana Samuchaya, and I compared with Peirce.
If you can share the paper, I would love to read, ma'am.
Yeah, it is in English, so I can share this paper with you.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, and
Pradeep ji is not here. Pradeep ji,
sorry?
aren't you? Pradeep ji is not here. Pradeep ji. Pradeep Gokhale.
Pradeep ji, where are you?
Gokhale ji is not here. Achha,
Oh.
chalo.
I'm here.
He is
You are
here.
I'm here. No comments.
here.
Wonderful paper. No problem. Yes.
Well, but for the future discussion, I would like to suggest that you try to propose some Indian terms or some Indian oppositions that may help us to translate these problematics in Sanskrit.
I didn't get you clear, madam. I didn't get you clear. You want me to suggest Sanskrit terms?
For the larger discussion, not now. And we will discuss together this problem. Okay?
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, sure.
Because aside of nimitta, there are other terms which we could use. Okay? So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And now I give the floor to who is our next speaker, Professor Minal Katarnikar. Where are you? Are you here with us? Professor Minal Katarnikar?
Yes.
Please.
Hi, Minal ji. How are you? Long time.
Hello, I'm good.
Good, good.
Nice to meet you. Thank you to participate in our roundtable.
Is my PPT visible?
Yes, we see your presentation.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. So go ahead.
Yeah, fine. Good. So, good afternoon. I'm saying good afternoon because in India it is 1:40. And greetings to all the scholars who are here in the meeting. First of all, at the outset, I express my sincere thanks to the organizers and especially to Dr. Pradeep Gokhale for introducing me to this group and inviting me for presenting a paper in this roundtable. The title of my paper is Three Paradigms of Perception, a Comparative and Critical Analysis. See, as a student of epistemology, I'm little concerned, maybe I'm very much concerned about the postmodern developments in epistemology as well as the phenomenon of knowledge and theorizing the very notion of knowledge. So I have started with this Foucault's quote, knowledge doesn't really form part of human nature. Conflict, combat, the outcome of the combat, and consequently risk and change are what gives rise to knowledge. Knowledge is not instinctive, it is counter-instinctive, just as it is not natural but counter-natural. So in this, Foucault represents all the postmodern web of scholars, and he is known for his very critical and radical views about knowledge and truth, which are perspectival in nature. It's not only Foucault, there are many others, but I just have taken just to start with. So problems of knowledge and truth are central to contemporary epistemology, like traditional or Enlightenment period. However, the genesis of these problems seems to be somewhere else, and hence the responses also present themselves in diverse forms and terms. Now, due to the lack of time, I want to focus on the main theme of my paper. I am not going to discuss all the responses in the contemporary times. So the research problem that I have articulated is like this, that as a student of philosophy and particularly epistemology, I feel it necessary to take cognizance of these contemporary responses to traditional epistemology and explore the basic framework of them, which may later help us to make them intelligible. That means why they are saying so may become intelligible. But at the starting point of this project, I have taken a task to showcase the three paradigms of knowledge vis-a-vis perception expounded in the classical Indian tradition. And through them, through this comparative analysis, I will try to address the contemporary epistemological problems and claims. So the theme of this paper is to discuss the three paradigms. One that is in Nyaya, the realistic tradition in the classical Indian philosophy. Then the Buddhist tradition, on which we just had two very extremely scholarly presentations on different angles of Buddhism. And the third is the Jaina paradigm, Jainism being a relativist and realist school in the Indian tradition. Now, when I was exploring this theme, I feel it necessary to put before the gathering of the scholars that the differences in their articulation of perception vis-a-vis knowledge has its close relation with the articulation of subject, object, and knowledge interrelationship. So we cannot just isolate the problem of perception or the theory of perception. In these three paradigms, what we get is to that we have to connect it to their theorization of how the three factors in knowledge, the subject on the one hand, object on the other hand, and the cognition or knowledge on the other, they are articulated in these three traditions. So I begin with this Nyaya theory of Pratyaksha. In Gautama's Nyaya Sutra, perception, that is the first source of knowledge or the direct knowledge, is defined as Indriyartha Sannikarsha Janyam Jnanam Pratyaksham Avyapadesham Avyabhicharin Vyavasayatmakam. So perception is that determination that determinate unmistaken and true cognition, which is obtained through the contact between the sense organs and the object. So our five sense organs and the mind, which is also regarded to be one of the organs, though not sense organs, they are instrumental in getting us the cognition called perception. It is known to be the most direct, first-hand knowledge of the world around us. And it gives us knowledge of all the objects around us in the form of through the sensation of color, sound, smell, taste, touch, and the feelings of pleasure and pain, respectively. So, Nyaya definition of perception. This was given in Gautama's Nyaya Sutra and later on elaborated very eruditely by a scholar like Vachaspati Mishra and then Jayanta Bhatta as well. Udyotakara, Vachaspati Mishra and Jayanta Bhatta as well. So for Nyaya, the task of perception is to give determinative and true information of the object. It is not just to give the sensation, but it is to define the object for us, identify the object for us. And the truth of perceptual cognition can be obtained through the correspondence of the same, that means the cognition with the object. As we know, this is very realistic notion of truth and validity. Object has its independent existence in the world around. Subject has equally independent existence. And when the two interact with each other or to come in company with each other, there arises the cognition of the object, which is to be tested with the object. The role of subject in this whole phenomenon is to receive the impressions that are caused by the object. Nyaya articulates perception through two stages. One is indeterminate perception, that is sensation, and second, or we can say complete perception, in the form of determinate perception, where object is identified correctly by the subject. Because we are talking about the taxonomies as a broader theme of this roundtable, I have just given very shortly the classification of perception as expounded in the Nyaya tradition. This primary classification of perception is into two groups, ordinary and extraordinary. I could have used all the original Sanskrit terms, but I thought that the audience is not, that means audience would be more comfortable with these translations. But otherwise, Laukika and Alaukika Pratyaksha. So ordinary perception includes all those cognitions which we receive through 5 sense organs and a mind. It is further classified as external and internal. So 5 sense organs give us external perception, and the perception received through the mind is called as internal perception. There is another group called extraordinary perception, but again, due to the lack of time and lack of all the details that are required, I have not gone into the details of the varieties of extraordinary perception. But more or less, it goes into the direct knowledge of universals, the combined knowledge of varieties of sensations, and lastly, the intuition that almost all Indian schools have accepted as the form of direct knowledge. This is one paradigm of perception where we have 3 factors playing their different roles in giving us the perceptual cognition. Then with this, we go to the second paradigm, that is Buddhist theory of perception. Just now we heard about Dinaga's contribution to Buddhist epistemology. I am referring to the definition of perception given by Dinaga, Pratyaksham Kalpana Podham. So in his Pramana Samuchaya, Dinaga defines perception as the cognition in which there is no conceptual construction. So conceptual construction means association of name and genus, etc., with a thing perceived, which results in verbal designation of the thing. That which is devoid of such conceptual construction is perception, according to the definition of Dinaga. Here, the features of this definition of perception are, in a way, it is very unusual idea of perception to be non-constructive is the fundamental characteristic of sense perception, and establishment of sense perception is done in a way negatively, and according to Buddhists, that is the important way, or that is the, and according to the negative way of putting it, cognition from any ascription of name, form, quality, action, substance, and universal is perception. So if any of these ideas, any of these concepts are associated with our cognition, then it lands into a different category of knowledge, and it doesn't anymore a perception. So if perception is not associated with any of these ideas or any of these concepts, then what it is? So according to the definition of Dinaga, the real perception is only the first moment of perception, and the function is to make the object present to the senses. Its object is Swalakshana, that is momentary, particular, and the function of sense perception consists in recognizing only the presence of the object and nothing more. To construct the image of the object is executed by another faculty. And therefore, the salient feature of sense perception is that it is non-constructive. In this pure sensation, there is no slightest admixture of thought or intellect. In sensation, there is only a sort of awareness of something and nothing else. It is therefore held that pure sensation is beyond the scope of our thought, without any image, without any mode, without any determination. And as a definition says, it is free from kalpana and vikalpa. So it is called as nirvikalpaka pratyaksha, that is indeterminate perception or pure sensation, as our choice could be. But this is a difficulty in this kind of articulation, that if we are defining perception as completely non-constructive or free from verbal association, what about its truth? According to Dinnaga, it is the point where we come in touch with ultimate reality, which is in the form of movements. So it is trans-empirical. It is free from conceptual construction and therefore beyond the distinction of truth and falsity. So pure perception per se is beyond truth and falsity. It is the case. And the distinction between truth and error is applicable to conceptual construction as such. In Buddhist analysis of perception also, we find this classification of perception given. First is sense perception, then mental perception, introspection, and yogic intuition. These are the 4 subvarieties of perceptual cognition. So more when we talk about the subject-object relationship. Then the third paradigm that we have is the paradigm we find in the Jaina definition. The Jaina logicians define perception as that cognition which is clear and vivid. They find it very difficult to define it through any other characteristics, because according to them, there are no characteristics, there are no adjectives which will include both empirical and transcendent perception within the scope of that definition. And according to them, perception has 2 main varieties. One is empirical perception and the other is transcendent perception. So there are 2 varieties of empirical perception. Indriya pratyaksha, that is sense perception, and another is anindriya pratyaksha, that is mental perception. These are 3 subvarieties of transcendent perception. But again, I am avoiding the discussion on transcendent perception. This is something which Jainas have taken a lot of efforts to sensation. Second is curiosity to know more about the object of sensation. Third is determinate perception. And the fourth is retention of the impressions of determinate perception. So according to the Jaina logicians, it begins with sensation and technically ends with dharana, that is retention. However, as a cognition, perception gets its fulfilled form at the third stage, that is determinate perception. In a way, we find its similarity to Nyaya paradigm, but with some important differences. Now, these 3 definitions of perception and these 3 articulations of perception, they have their own way. That means because perceptual cognition is very fundamental to human person, every system of Indian philosophy, rather epistemology, has tried to give a very theorized form of perception. But if perception is so basic and everyone knows that we know the world through perception. Why there are three different paradigms? Is the metaphysics involved? Is the idea of self involved? Is the idea of maybe some psychology involved in these articulations of perception? And one possible way of looking at these differences is the different ways of defining the roles of subject and object in articulation of perception. So it would not be wrong to say that the three paradigms discussed earlier represent three paradigms of subject-object knowledge relationship. Again, I'm putting it in a very sketchy form. Details can be spelled out whenever the occasion arises. But the Nyaya paradigm of knowledge can be summarized as the process involving three components: object as the key factor, and the main cause of cognition, subject as the receiver, rather passive receiver of the input given by the object, and finally cognition, which is a product or a result of the one-way interaction that takes place between the subject and the object. In a way, object seems to be the sole determinant to confirm the validity of the entire process. And Nyaya paradigm can well be described as the object-centric paradigm of knowledge, embedding both realism and pluralism. Buddhist understanding is slightly different. They are very insistent about one-to-one relationship between the faculty of the subject and the object and the resulting cognition. So the faculty of subject, namely sensation, only can give the subject the cognition called perception. And if we switch over to another faculty called reasoning, we have another variety of knowledge, which is something different from perception. So it is very exclusivist paradigm of knowledge as well as perception. According to Buddhists, the factors, namely subject and object, are interdependent and can be articulated only as having reciprocal relation. They acquire meaning only in reciprocity, not in isolation. And the interrelatedness among them form the justification for our knowledge of the external world, in turn for accepting the peculiar number of sources of knowledge, both in relation to the actuality and the potentiality of the knower. So this could be termed as either subject-centric or a constructivist paradigm of perception and knowledge. And we go to the third one, where we have a synthesis of the earlier two in a very interesting way. In Nyaya, we have a confluence of epistemology and spirituality, apart from the usual connectivity of epistemology and metaphysics. In addition to this, the Jaina theory of soul, that is the substance of consciousness, and that of knowledge get developed hand in hand. Each of these provides a good justification for the other one. So it presents a synthesis of realism and constructivism, that is a synthesis of, one can say, Nyaya as well as Buddhism. Now, connecting to the present day, I quoted Foucault earlier, and the postmodern thinkers are showing their shift in the ontology of knowing from a separated subject and object, where the object world is set up as transcendent of subjectivity, to a lived world or an intersubjective dialogue realm or a discursively constructed world. And all this shift seems to have been addressed in the Nyaya Buddhist Jaina polemics about perceptual cognition. So Nyaya could be like a thesis where we have the separated subject and object in knowledge. In Buddhism and Buddhist and the Jaina paradigms of knowledge, we have this idea of subject and object sharing the same space and influencing one another in their unique ways. But Buddhists giving more importance to subject in their way, because for them the idea of world is something not acceptable in a common sense realistic manner. And the Jainas being realist, they have both the factors, like there is subject influencing or subject illuminating the object and object illuminating the subject. Now it is a choice of a particular theory which factors to include in the definition of knowledge and which factors to keep aside. And this choice may depend upon epistemic as well as non-epistemic reasons, in the sense that in see, the relation between epistemology and metaphysics is a very standard one, very routine one in the theories of knowledge. Unless we have some idea of reality, it is very difficult to talk about maybe the concept of knowledge, because we know something and that forms the reality. But in addition to this, maybe some kind of psychological elements, or as we find in Jaina tradition, some kind of spiritual or maybe transcendent elements also form part of the definition of knowledge. And that is how the priorities of the systems, priorities of the upholders of the systems, they bring in the uniqueness to their own paradigm of perception as well as knowledge. There is a lot to discuss, but I would like to have the questions maybe, or if I have made any sense to the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Meenal Katarnikar, for a very clear and insightful presentation of this difficult subject of classifying Indian knowledge for Westerners, for Western philosophical audience. It's very important in intercultural philosophy to have some common background of terms and classifications, when we can share some ideas of our specific philosophical traditions. And I think that yours classification is very helpful because it opens the most important perspectives on perception and sensation included in Indian tradition. There were also many others. I say that every Indian darshana has its own epistemological device, but these three, I agree with you, the three are perhaps the most important ones. So I suggest our audience to inquire Professor about her paper for further discussion. Please.
May I?
Yeah.
Hi, Meenal. Long time, lovely
Hi.
hearing you as usual.
Yes.
It is no questions, just let's think together some of the things for more clarification in the discipline.
Yes.
First is that Savikalpa, Nirvikalpaha. You went ahead saying that Bauddhas subscribe to the Nirvikalpa, but Bauddhas declined the very divide of Savikalpa, Nirvikalpa, right? So it is not that they subscribe to the Nirvikalpaka and keep silent about the Savikalpaka.
No.
By definition, they say that this very division is wrong. Yeah, that's very
by definition, by default, perception has to be indeterminate only. There is no question of Savikalpaka as at all. If what we call as, that means what the realists, what the Bahyarthavadis call as Savikalpaka Pratyaksha is only the determinate cognition, which according to them can be subsumed under a general notion of inference, Anumana we can say, so reasoning, because the language is associated with that. But it is not, it is not a variety of perception at all. So
So
for them,
Dindaka
it is pure
says that-
sensation.
Yeah, sorry. Dindaka says that there are only two grahyas. One is the immediate
Lakshan.
particular, and the other
No,
is the
please,
generality.
don't start the true discussion. Just formulate your question,
yeah.
and then we will
Second is-
discuss it.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I also have to contribute to this topic.
Can I ask one more question about Ardhakriya Karitva?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ardhakriya Karitva is, I don't know whether you mentioned about it, the validation of perception. I always have been wondering whether they have been applying the pragmatic theory or coherence theory. I'm not explaining because the chair, just, no, she's concerned about it.
My
When,
question-
I don't know. Can I quickly respond?
No, not now. We will discuss that.
It is.
And my question is, what is your opinion on the Indo-European and Western classification of theories of knowledge in saying empirical and rationalist?
Yes.
So
yes.
this is for
Again, I would. Yes.
yeah,
yes.
not now. Just between
fine.
empiricism and rationalism, where we place our Indian Buddhist schools. This is for further discussion. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Now
Thank
we have to pass to Professor Kuntala Bhattacharya. Are you here?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, dear Professor Ilsenko. Could I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Dear Professor Katarnikar, I have some question about extraordinary perception, which you mentioned in your paper. You said that at least in Nyaya, this extraordinary perception deals with the universals, as far as I understood. Yes, and I'm specifically interested in answering the question, which mental faculty in India is involved in cognition of the universals? And maybe you can suggest some literature on this topic.
Yes.
Not now.
First, I
not
will
now.
suggest the literature. Should I?
No, not now, please.
No, okay, fine. Okay.
This is a long question.
Sure.
So
Just a very immature inquiry. Do we get the opportunity to respond to the queries that have been raised in the
in
round
the
table?
discussion after this, in the overall discussion after the last speaker, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you
To
very
give the opportunity to the speakers to present their papers. Otherwise, we can stop at every paper and discuss eternally. The questions are very involving, so we'll give the chance to others to present their papers.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you for a great paper.
Kuntala Bhattacharya, please.
Yes.
Where are you?
Am I audible?
Yes.
Am I audible?
For a moment, you are audible, yes. But we are not seeing you.
Yes.
Where are you?
Am I not visible also?
Yes, we hear you, but yes, now we see you. Great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for
So I
coming.
thank Professor Gokhale and also Professor Victoria Lysenko for allowing me to present my thoughts or sharing thoughts in this occasion, in this round table. And the topic of my discussion is today Pramana Vyavastha, a unique Buddhist view. I'll be just, I'm not equipped with any PowerPoint presentation, so I'll be just reading out. Now, generally speaking, the sources of knowledge, or means of knowledge, that is the pramanas. It's a commonsensic view that the sources of knowledge at the pramanas may converge That means abhisamplavante, on one and the same object. As for example, you cognize the fire directly because your sense of vision is in contact with it. Cognize it directly by way of the smoke as a sign of presence, or by being able to discern the meaning of a statement like there is fire. Both of these are indirect cognitions of fire. Now, it's the same real particular that we both come to be aware of. Our awarenesses may feel different. The fire may be much more vividly present to you than it is to me. But that did not mean that we are aware of two distinct things. As we understand here, the presupposition behind this commonsensical view is that my way of cognizing is generally not dictated by the object of my cognition. The Buddhists, however, reject this counsel of common sense. Kindly note here that the term Buddhist I apply here, I mean, it is restricted only to the Sautrantika Yogacara Buddhists, a tradition which was initiated by Dignaga and very effectively carried out by his disciple Dharmakirti and others. According to these Buddhists, I mean, the Buddhists will point out that the fire whose presence on the hill I thereby cognize indirectly is something that is present wherever smoke is present and whose absence is never found wherever smoke occurs. But what sort of fire is that is present in all those different locations and whose absence is always found together with the absence of smoke? A fire that can be present in many different places and can be active also in many others is not the particular fire that I see up on the hill. Nor is the fire indirectly cognized through words and shared through words. The particular fire that I see up on the hill. It is not shared, it is not shareable also through words. So what I cognize is the Buddhists indirectly, not the particular fire, but fire in general. Now this view can be interpreted from two perspectives. First, from the perspective of the objects which are being cognized, and second, from the standpoint of the cognitions which grasp these objects. Let us consider the first standpoint. According to the Buddhists, a world of experience can be divided into two mutually exclusive domains. In the first verse of the chapter on perception in Pramanavartika, Dharmakirti provides the differentiating marks for this supposed categorization as follows. First, he says, Arthakriyayam Shaktir Ashaktitoha. That is, Shakti should be understood here as capability or power or samarthya. And as Manoratha Nandi in his Vritti explains, Arthakriya Samartha in this case would mean Gyanadikayam Swarupa Upadhanino Samartha. Therefore, things can be divided on the basis of their capability to generate cognition. Second is Sadrisha or Sadrishat. That is the mark of having resemblance. Things can either be similar to other things or can be distinct. And thirdly, Shabdasya Vishaya Avishayatya. Now, this is the differentiating mark of expressibility. Things can either be expressible through words or not. And the fourth criterion is the criterion of dependency in generating cognition. Anya nimittanang bhabi dhi sat asatvatah. That is, things can be grasped either or not. That means a thing can be grasped only by virtue of the thing itself. Now, on this criterion or on these demarcating factors, Dharmakirti concludes that things which are capable of generating cognition, distinct or dissimilar, not expressible through words, and can be known by virtue of their own essence, are particulars or the swalakshanas. And things which are not capable of generating cognition, through words, and can be known through the help of other conditions, through conditions other than itself, are called the uniques or samakshas. It's clear that the conditions are interlinked in some way or other. For if an object is capable of generating consciousness on its own, it should not depend on any other conditions to give rise to consciousness having its form. And again, if it is not similar to other understands, it cannot be expressed through words, because it is reality and reality that begets language or communicability. Or in other words, we may say that language presupposes semantic distribution. So when selected is real, it has no distribution over other instances. I think you, asking Victoria, is she saying anything?
Yes. Not very clearly, unfortunately. The connection with your home internet is feeble. So could you pronounce slowly and articulate more? Because some words just evaporated because of the bad connection.
I'll be trying to.
Yeah.
What I was trying to say that the condition which I have.
Олег, что мы можем сделать? Олег, что мы можем сделать?
Ну, я не знаю. Попросить, чтобы она выключила видео, но она, по-моему, уже у нее дисконнектнулась.
Ага. Да, понятно.
Попросить перезайти и без видео попробовать.
Вы попробуйте сказать ей.
Ну, такая ее сейчас здесь нету.
Ее нету. Well, there is an interruption in our session. Professor.
It's audible.
Yeah. So
I can't start my video actually. I don't know what's the reason for that.
Perhaps it is the best way that you just talk without presenting yourself, because the connection is very slow, and your presentation, your screen is involved, and it takes the traffic. So better to give your talk without presentation on the screen. Okay.
Video. Okay. Now, I was just asking whether the four conditions which I have stated are the differentiating factors. Are they, were they audible?
Yeah.
Were the four differentiating factors audible?
You may repeat once more.
Okay. So what I was trying to say is that according to the Buddhists, a world of experience consists of domains either directly or indirectly known, and therefore it can be divided into two mutually exclusive domains. In the first verse of the chapter on perception, in Pramanavartika, Dharmakirti provides the differentiating marks for this supposed categorization as follows. First, he says that Shakta Ashaktitaho Arthakriyayam. That means Shakti here should be understood as capability or power or samarthya. And as Manorathanandi in his Vritti explains, Arthakriya samartha in this case would mean Gyanadikayam Swarupa Upadhanena Samarthaha. Therefore, things can be divided on the basis of their capability to generate cognition or not. Second, Sadrisha Asadrishat, that is, the mark of having resemblance. Things can either be similar to other things or can be distinct. Third, Shabdasya Vishaya Avishayatva, that is, the differentiating mark of expressibility. Things can either be expressible through words or not. Fourth, Anya Nimittanang Bhabe Dhi Sat Asatatvata, that is, the mark of dependency in generating cognition. That is, things can be grasped either independently of any other accompanying causes or not. Now, Dharmakirti concludes that things which are capable of generating cognition are distinct or dissimilar, not expressible through words, and can be known by virtue of their own essence, are particulars, are swalakshanas. And things which are not capable of generating cognition, similar, expressible through words, and can be known through the help of conditions other than itself, are called universals or samanya lakshanas. Am I audible? Am I audible? Okay, thank you. Now, it is clear that the conditions are interlinked in some way or other. For if an object is capable of generating consciousness on its own, it should not depend on any other conditions to give rise to consciousness having its form. And again, if it is not similar to others and stands unique, it cannot be expressed through words because it is only commonality that begets language or communicability. Or in other words, language presupposes semantic distribution. So when a salakshana is ultimately real, it has no distribution over the instances. Moreover, since the criterion of existence is causal efficacy, only the swalakshanas are existent or real in the true sense of the term. This criterion of reality is not applicable to objects which are shareable through words because they are in fact concepts or names that figure as qualifiers in judgmental cognitions. These are treated therefore as non-momentary and unreal in the true sense. I mean, it's real only in the conventional sense of the term. That is, they are samvriti sat. Now, the Buddhists assert that this difference in the objects dictate the source of cognition which grasps it. Perception, according to Dharmakirti, is a causal process. That is, when a perception occurs, a sensory object acts as the contributing cause for the production of a cognition in which the image or akaro of that sensory object appears. This requirement of being a cause on the part of the object can only be fulfilled by a svalakshana, which is real in the true sense of the term and therefore has causal efficacy. Since this svalakshana is momentary as it is real, it again cannot be similar to anything else and is incapable of being expressed by words. The argument therefore is as follows: perception is a causal process and therefore requires a cause. Only ultimately real entities are capable of being a cause and produce effects. Therefore, only ultimately real entities can be the objects of perception. The Samanya Lakshanas, on the other hand, are expressible through language. In order for this referential function of language and thought to succeed, Samanya Lakshanas cannot change. Anything unchanging or enduring cannot have causal efficacy. Therefore, Samanya Lakshanas cannot be perceived, and yet they are known. In order to explain their cognition, a different source of knowledge has to be admitted. This is what is called inference. So the situation is like this, that perception reveals only the particulars or swalakshanas, and inference reveals only the samanya lakshanas or universals. The difference between these two types of pramanas, therefore, ultimately rests on the difference between their respective objects. Each pramana has its own distinctive jurisdiction. Pratyaksha never reveals a samanya lakshana, and inference never grasps a swalakshana. It may be noted here that samanya lakshanas, though unreal or conventionally real, are not momentary. That means, they are not non-entities like a sky flower or the son of a barren woman. That means Akasha Kusuma or Bandhaputra. Pure non-entities cannot even feature as items of experience. But the Samanya Lakshanas can be presented in our judgmental awarenesses, and it is clear that all our mundane behavior, including verbal communications, are heavily dependent on such awarenesses. Therefore, the objects of such awareness are, so to say, quasi-real. Insofar they are objects of cognition, they resemble real entities, and since they cannot stand logical examination, they cannot be said to be full-fledged reals either. This theory of the Buddhists, that pramanas have their distinctive jurisdiction, is known as pramana vyavastha. Now we come to a second point. For the Buddhists, perception and inference are both pramanas, and therefore a general definition of pramana is needed, which covers both these cases. The only feature that they share in common, they means the perception and inference, which also distinguishes them from memory, illusion, or doubt, is the fact that both these pramanas lead to successful activity. A pramana, therefore, is defined as avisangbadakam jnanam, or a non-deceiving cognition. In other words, a cognition is pramana if it reveals a form, and the person to whom that form is revealed, if he wishes to procure the object, he is driven towards it and obtains it. Thus, it is a single cognition which reveals the object. That means it's the Vishaya Pradarshaka, it generates volition, that means Pravartaka, and also has the ability to make one attain it, that is the prapaka, and is therefore a pramana. That means a pramana should always be a single consciousness which has these three characteristics of Vishaya Pradarshakatva, Pravartakatva, and Prapakatva. Now, we must note here that this cognition, although all these three characters are ascribed to it, does not have the power to forcibly incite a person to act. We all know that, because the only act the cognition directly performs is revealing the object, artha avagati. And since revealing the object is the only act that a pramana can perform, the Buddhists assert that the pramana is identical with the pramana phala. The single consciousness, I mean, they have in hand only a single consciousness which is momentary. Therefore, they cannot distinguish, or they cannot say that the relation between the pramana and the pramana phala can be one of cause and effect. So it's only a single consciousness which can be a pramana and also a pramana phala, or the result of that pramana. And the relation between these two objects is that of this cognition, I mean the pramana and the pramana phala, is babusthapya, babusthapaka bhava sambandha. That means the determined and the determinant relation. Now, this is why Dharmottara, I mean Dharmottara is the commentator on Dharmakirti's Nyayabindu, we all know that. In his commentary, Dharmottara in his commentary on Nyayabindu states that Ata eva artha adhigatir eva pramana phalam. He clearly states that artha adhigatir eva pramana phalam. And he continues, Tatha chasati arthadhigamat samaptaha pramana vyapyaraha. That is, the function of the pramana ends once it reveals the object to the knower. This fact leads, in fact, to another definition of pramana, which Dharmakirti clearly states in Pramanavartika, anadhigatang vishayang pramanam. The implication is that in order to be a pramana and hence a prapaka, a cognition needs to perform the function of revealing its object. If therefore an object has already been revealed, then a cognition grasping it has no other function to perform and therefore cannot be a pramana. The previous cognition has already performed the action of revealing. I mean, Adhyena eva, I'm quoting from the Durveka Mishra's Tika on Dharmottara. Durveka Mishra says that Adhyena eva kartyabhya sat pritatvat iti bhavaha. The former cognition has already performed the function which is already performed the function which it should, and therefore the second cognition or the subsequent cognition has no other function to perform. And thus Durveka concludes, Pramana Sanklaba Namo Nasti Eva Iti Prakashitaha. A single object cannot be known by different pramanas. This view, to state briefly, therefore, does not admit a priori knowledge and relies, like the empiricists, heavily on experience. It is for this reason that the Buddhists claim that causation is not a rational concept, but a habit of thought formed through repeated experiences, just as we have learned in Hume, studied in Hume. And yet the Buddhists, unlike the empiricists like Hume, divided the world of experience into phenomena and noumena, though they admit that noumena can also be known. It's idealism, no doubt, but not transcendental idealism. This theory of pramana vyavastha has been vehemently criticized by the realists. most of the objections focus on the Buddhists' rejection of the difference between the locus and the located, or the dharma-dharmi bhavaha, or the rejection of the universals. But the most important objections against this Buddhist theory may be stated as follows.
5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I mean, in his criticism of the Buddhist view, Udyatakara in his Vartika of Nyaya Bhashya of Vatsyayana states that it is not permissible to assume that the objects as well as the pramanas are only twofold, and as such, pramana sanklava is not possible. For in fact, pramanas are fourfold and their objects are threefold: the universal, the samanya, the particular, the vishesha, and the substance, characterized by the two qualities, namely universality and particularity. Therefore, the same substance can be rightly known through various pramanas. The same jar, after being known by the visual sense organ, may be known again by the tactual sense organ. This is an example of the convergence of the different forms of the same pramana, proving the same object. On similar considerations, Udyatakara shows that the convergence of the different forms of pramanas, like verbal testimony, inference, and perception, can prove the same object. Now, another objection, I'm just shortening my paper. Another objection against pramana sanklava, which the Buddhists have raised, is that after an object is already proved by one pramana, any subsequent pramana, proving it over again is redundant. Now, Udyatakara shows the futility of such an objection. The same object is known by different pramanas in different ways. Even after an object is known through verbal testimony or inference, one may have the desire of ascertaining one may have the desire. According to me, this is the final objection against the Buddhists. At least according to me, this is my humble, suggestion, that if we have the desire of ascertaining the same object by direct perception, and if the conditions permitting perception are there, the perceptual knowledge must follow. It is useless to decry it as redundant, because the efficacy lies in the final cessation of all inquiries concerning the object. In case of restriction, vyavastha, however, there being only one pramana appropriate for the object, the question of inquiring about it by any other pramana does not arise. And as such, there is no apprehension of subsequent pramana being redundant. Now, there are other objections of Jayanta Bhatta, who says that the question of pramana sanklava is he discusses the question of pramana sanklava, that is this topic of pramana sanklava, and defends it by showing that even the Buddhists cannot establish the validity of inference without admitting it. But for me, the most important objection is that we have always learned that ichha samagri, the causes which, or the conditions which generate ichha or a desire, they surpass all other conditions. So if there is a desire to know an object, no one can in any way restrict our knowledge to one object or one object of cognition only. So this is all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pure pleasure to listen to you, because I'm also very involved in these subjects. And thank you for the brilliant presentation of this cognitive classification, very important for Indian philosophy, between pramana sanklava and pramana vyavastha. on the basis of Dharmakirti and later Nyaya philosophers. It's very interesting to know your opinion, whether we can find anything which could be compared with this classification in the Western philosophy. And
Yes,
perhaps
I was trying to say about humankind, but I haven't elaborated on those topics. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe other participants have some questions or comments for further discussion. Professor Gokhale, are you here? Well,
Yes, I was also, yes.
Yeah.
I was also curious to know whether we can have some Western parallels of this kind of debate. That is, whether in our cognition of an object, both experience and reason, if both are involved, then it will be something like Pramana Samplava rather than
Yes.
So
Yeah.
empiricists like David Hume, they would be more in favor of Pramana Vyavastha rather than theory. So more discussion is possible on this. Thank you.
There are some other opinions or perspectives on this subject. Are they? In that case, I have to give the floor to myself, to me.
Okay.
Let me ask Oleg to switch on my presentation. Oleg, yeah. And I will ask Oleg to help me in switch between the presentations. So the subject of my papers, you know, is emotions and feelings in Indian classification of cognitive processes across cultural or intercultural perspective. A contemporary Western psychology and philosophy of mind in their theories of emotions and feelings rely on the achievements of neurosciences, of brain and neural processes. In this paper, I left aside brain-mind problem and concentrate myself on a conceptual system primarily psychological, within which the philosophical mind-body problem is formulated today. Slide 2. Oleg, slide 2. Thank you. So in terms of contemporary psychology, emotions and feelings are classified as different types of affective mental phenomena, differing in a number of criteria like duration, complexity, level of consciousness involved, intensity of physiological manifestations. So from one side, there are emotions, which are classified as short-term, simple, and intense psychological reactions, and feelings as longer-lasting, complex, and most stable states of consciousness, constructed and categorized within particular culturally determined system of values. Indian civilization is characterized by highly developed classificatory approach with regard to all areas of its culture. Sorry? Something wrong? May I continue? Okay. Classificatory approach with regard to all areas of its cultural activity, codified, as we know, as Shastras. We can find numerous lists of Shastras disciplines of knowledge and practice in many Sanskrit texts beginning from the 1st century AD. This in itself is the evidence for highly developed analytical and synthetic mental operations, skills of differentiation, systematization, categorization, and catalogization of data belonging to different spheres of human activity. Slide 3. However, the general opinion of many Indologists and academic scholars in cognitive psychology studying the theories of affective experience in India is that the systematic investigation of how emotions might be categorically distinguished from feelings in Indian thought has been hindered by a fundamental challenge. How do we identify and classify what we term emotions in the West within the Indian intellectual framework? Many Indologists joined the cross-disciplinary anthropological study of emotion and developing theoretical paradigms helpful for interpreting human experience under a very different metaphysical and analytical assumptions and classifications. There are many publications on the status of emotions in India. I will mention only some of the recent books. You can read yourself. I will not read it for you. And I also, please, slide 5. I also have to mention a very important article in Stanford Encyclopedia dedicated to emotions in Indian philosophy. The authors of this encyclopedia, who is Yoski, states that there was no general classificatory term for emotion in India, but there were some terms that they translated, we can translate as feelings. Terms used in Sanskrit texts include Vedana, Bhava, as well as names of individual emotions such as Raga, Dvesha, Bhaya, and Shoka. Slide 6. Slide 6. Yes, we are ready on the 6th. For many among Indian and Western Indologists, there are some more or less evident analogues of the distinction between emotions and feelings, which can be found in some Indian disciplines of knowledge in Shastras. First of all, in theoretical aesthetic Natya Shastra, the concepts of rasa and bhava, in which bhava represent a short-term immediate emotional experience corresponding to the Western understanding of emotions, while rasa is a more stable emotional state or mood, which is closer to the concept of feelings. So you have a list of rasas and bhavas. Slide 7. In the majority of Shastras, emotions are linked with affective mental states designated as kleshas or avaranas, or there are some doshas. There are a lot of negative terms to designate emotions. And what is the most important, that they are regarded as causes of suffering, karmic obstacles, having a negative impact on cognitive and cognitive functions of a person. But most importantly, is that they constitute obstacles on the way to the main goal of a person, according to the traditional system of 4 human goals, purushartha, to moksha, liberation from samsara, the will of rebirths. The slide 8. Let us have a look at the classification of kleshas. So you know all these kleshas. in different systems, in different darshanas and in other shastras as well, in Ayurveda or Natya Shastra, etc., etc. So the causal karmic approach and the soteriological perspective of overcoming karmic causality define and shape each other. That is why the classification of emotions as such in their general and particular characteristics, as compared with other mental states like feelings, sensation, etc., did not develop. This is my main thesis. And that is why their cultural and religious status was estimated by negative general terms like clashes. Clashes are considered as the roots of all negative emotional states and unhealthy behavior patterns. In Ayurveda, they affect the balance of gumors or doshas and the overall state of human health. And the representation of Ayurveda classification of clashes is on our next slide. No, it's not. Well, so I just enumerate them. Avidya, Asmita, Raga, Dvesha, Abhinivesha. In the Theravada, there are 10 clashes, Mahayana 6 clashes. So let us switch to the slide 11. There is no coincidence. The most general classification terms for all dharmas in the Buddhist classifications are Samskrita dharmas, factors of existence in the karma samsara mode, Asamskrita, factors of liberation from karma samsara mode of mental life, that is equivalent to nirvana. The same holds true for the classification of the effective skillful methods, Upaya Kaushalya, which is divided into 3 main categories: skillful Kushala, unskillful Akushala, and neutral, neither Kushala nor Akushala. The karmic approach developed primarily in Buddhism, and it suggests the possibility of transforming affective states from samsara loaded to samsara neutral status, which do not lead to new rebirth, and for some school is accompanied by eternal bliss. Whether bliss is a good emotion or emotion at all, or it is a pure cognitive state of mind, depends on particular school. Transforming affective states of mind through Buddhist mindfulness practices was meant to eliminate karmic seeds, bija, and other kinds of karma productive tendencies in an individual mental experience. Among Buddhist soteriological pragmatics, it were the Abhidharmikas who most systematically studied mental experience to detect and to sort those affective reactions that enslave individuals in samsara and those that can serve as an antidote against enslavement, paksha pratipaksha, or fight fire with fire, as well as those transgressive experiences that switch consciousness to a trans-karmic mode. As a flash of enlightenment, as if a lamp was brought into the room. Due to Hinayana strategy, which I define in a humoristic way as the drowning man must stay save himself. The Abhidharmikas created unprecedented classifications of mental phenomena, Abhidharma's matrikas, based on systematic self-observation, which was termed as sati or smriti, literally holding in consciousness the moment that has just passed. We can compare these techniques with retention in phenomenology. While Abhidharma classifications of mental states, dharmas, were created primarily for soteriological purposes, they hold some scientific value today due to their systematic approach to documenting inner experience through mindfulness practices. This methodology inspired modern theories of embodied cognition. Varela, Thompson, Roche, the authors of the famous book Embodied Mind. And these authors, as you know, they seek to integrate Buddhist mindfulness into scientific study of consciousness, which is now termed as neurophenomenology. It seems to me that in the light of the karmic approach, the Western division into emotions and feelings loses its basic significance, its justifications, since we cannot make distinction between them on the same criteria, duration, intensity that I was mentioned before. But at the same time, the karmic approach may obtain a new footing in classification of various categories of potential experience, explaining the unconscious way the karmic retribution works. Slide 12, please. Some of our speakers has already mentioned the Buddhist categories that may refer to their potential sphere of experience, that of Dharmakirti. The last speaker, who it was Professor Kuntala Bhattacharya, where Jignaga make a very important suggestion that there may be not simply the facts which are already finished, which are already achieved its full form, but also some tendencies, the capabilities, like the capability of producing words or producing speech. He mentioned two cases, the babies and the blind people. So this is the switch to the potential sphere of experience that was taken in consideration in the Buddhist epistemology. So kleshas remains a general classificatory term. And let us have a look on the varieties of these potential forms of causation. They are anusaya, say a tendency towards a certain type of sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, as well as towards ignorance. Anushaya is identical to the actual manifestation. Then there is bija, potency, that gradually matures like a grain of rice before it bears its fruit. And then there is a vasana, from vas to dwell, or the ability to impart smell. So it's like something which action leaves behind, like aroma, imprint. And there is a very important potentiality term as karma phala vipaka, the process of ripening itself, and samsara, the karmic factor, intention, or the force of inertia, a pattern of established habit that governs our behavior. So we have different mechanisms of mental phenomena, which include cognitive factors like intention, chetana, attention, manasikara, vitarka, and vichara, and which I can translate as review and selection of an object, samadhi, determination, energy, etc. So in the list of factors contributing to cognitive experience, we find not only emotions, but we also find some volitional factors like determination, energy, etc. So let us switch to the following slide. I think that under karmic approach, the division into feelings and emotions may be interpreted as different forms of karmic causation, and thus spontaneity of emotion will escape classification. In this case, we can interpret affective states both as feelings from which emotions arise and as emotions generating feelings. The vast majority of schools of Indian philosophy position themselves as soteriological. Some of them develop certain epistemic strategies to moksha, primarily Nyaya and Vaisheshika, which are combined with the karmic approach. And this combination of soteriological karmic approach and epistemic approach caused certain problems in soteriology. I mean, the well-known case of the liberated Atman, devoid of consciousness, which the critics compared to an inanimate object. All of us know the famous words that it is better to be reborn in the Vrindavan forest as a jascal than to be the follower of the Vaisheshika conception of moksha. So the Nyaya Vaisheshikas were doing their best to accumulate the soteriological perspective in their classification of categories of padarthas, because the problem was that they made a distinction between gunas and dravyas, qualities and substances. If we take Atman as substance and guna and consciousness as its quality, in that case, proclaiming that in liberation state, Atman is free from all its qualities, means that Atman is also not conscious. So it is a real problem for Nyaya Vaisheshika tradition. If we take the epistemological Buddhist tradition, the slide 14, please. This tradition, in this tradition, the affective sphere entirely falls within the competence of manas as the inner sense. In the list of objects of manas or manasa pratyaksha, inner sense, a sensation, you see that there are all sorts of affective states. And all these affective states enlisted here enter into the category of chaita, mental factors accompanying chitta, according to Abhidharma matrix. All of them were considered as sources of all cognitive delusions and behavior deviation, as well as the cause of all this behavior and mental states. The general cause is the effective attachment to objects of experience constructed by consciousness itself. Thus, general classification terms for emotions undergoing soteriological rubrics of affective states, such as the already mentioned kleshas, doshas, are designations of categories from the karmic soteriological point of view, which has nothing to do with Western scientific perspective. The last slide, 15. At the same time, I propose that the karmic approach offers a unique framework for investigating the hidden layers of human experience, like Jung's concept of archetypes. It may suggest the existence of deep psychological patterns that accumulate and persist across generations within particular cultural contexts. This perspective could potentially illuminate how collective experiential potential is preserved and transmitted through civilizational memory. This is the end of my talk. Thank you very much. Yeah. Are there any questions or comments?
Hello. Professor Lysenko, it was a wonderful talk. And classification of emotions, understanding emotions in proper perspective is very important. And as you have pointed out, in Indian tradition, mostly it is discussed in the context of karmic perspective and in terms of kleshas and so on and so forth. At the same time, maybe one can also discuss the sublime emotions like Maitri, Karuna, which are not included under kleshas, but they are supposed to transcend kleshas. Maybe you can also include in your paper the.
But what is their status? Are they regarded? Are they classified somehow?
Okay, I mean, you can respond in details.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. And now I invite to the floor my colleague, Dr. Chitlin. Where are you?
Hello.
Lev. His
Yes.
name is Lion, and he will be now. You will see. He will be a lion of our session.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, and also my warm greetings to all participants from India. Today, the topic of my paper will be. Oh, I'm sorry, my camera is broken, but I will share my screen. Where you can see the text. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the topic of my paper is comparing mental terminology in Latin and Sanskrit philosophy, preliminary considerations. I will present my thoughts in the form of thesis, so you can see also at the screen. First thesis is that we can distinguish two mainstream philosophical cultures in the world. That is the Western one, which has originated originally in the Greek language, but finally it has been brought into Latin soil, finally during the period of Renaissance. And then Latin terminology became the flesh and blood of the scientific terminology of the languages of the rising European nations. And the second mainstream philosophical culture is the Indian one, which was formed in different languages, Sanskrit, Pali, Buddhist, Hybrid Sanskrit, different Prakrits and Middle Indian languages, and so on, and eventually in modern Indian languages, but till nowadays has Sanskrit or close to Sanskrit vocabulary in its base. The core of the philosophical terminological apparatus being of Sanskrit origin. In Indian tradition, we find various terms designating mental faculties, indriyas, manas, buddhi, ahankara, vijnana, chitta, antahkarana, and terms designating what we can conventionally call subject using terminology of Latin origin, or the self using English. That is Atman, Jiva, Paramatman, which is identical with Brahman. The process of human cognition, the doctrine of Pramanas, Pratyaksha, and Anumana, and so on, conceptualized and non-conceptualized cognition, the principles of polemical logic have been investigated in depth. A Latin language tradition also has a whole set of terms: sensus, that is senses or sense organs, sensus communis, and sensus interior, both being the sense which unites all our perceptions and can be compared with both manas and buddhi. Ratio, which deals with the level of logic and natural reality and makes us different from the animals. Intellectus, or intelligence, mens, which almost entirely corresponds to mind in English. Two kinds of soul, animus and anima, that is spiritual and emotional soul. The verbs intellegere and in its later variant intelligere, which means literally to understand, and so on. It is not quite clear how we could match European Latin terms with Indian Sanskrit terms, and that is the question. Sanskrit, Latin, Greek, all three are the languages of the larger Indo-European family, and moreover, key languages, especially as far as philosophy is concerned. We can say that the Indo-European region, in the Indo-European region, autochthonous philosophy arose only in Greek and Sanskrit languages. We can often find some striking similarities in some external elements of these big traditions, in, so to say, broader sense. Both have the highly elaborated theory of the universals, the concept of substance. They discuss, but from completely different perspectives, however, the problem of what can be called the Latin word subject. They both talk on the immortality of the soul investigate how cognition functions, have the soteriological intention in their core, raise the problem of the real existence of the external world, debate on ethical problems, argue about the existence and actual power of the gods, and so on and so on. It looks like we could possibly build a successful and effective intercultural philosophy designed to finally solve all philosophical problems, at least if the Indo-European language cultural region is concerned. However, within the Indo-European cultural area, we seem to find two principal paradigms of philosophical attitude. First is European. Intelligence, or intellectus in Latin, is the key means of attaining the higher reality in Europe. Cicero in Tusculan Disputations says, "Whatever then that is which thinks and which has understanding and volition and the principle of life is heavenly and divine, and on that account must necessarily be eternal. Nor can God himself, who is known to us, be conceived to be anything else except a soul, free and unembarrassed, distinct from all mortal concretion, acquainted with everything and giving motion to everything, and itself endued with perpetual motion. Of this kind and nature is the intellect of man." This is translation by Young. The same tradition continued up to the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. John Scotus Eriugena said, "Nemo intrat in celum nisi per philosophiam." That is, no one enters heaven except through philosophy. And philosophy is a kind, so to say, intellectual way. Marsilio Ficino is in his Platonic theology on the immortality of the soul proves the immortality of the soul by reference to the intellectual faculties which make us akin to God. The intellect in Europe has historically been concerned with comprehending universals, categories, the world of ideas, while ideas are located in the mind, mens or intellectus of God. On the contrary, in India, there seems to have been little discussion on the problem of intelligence as such. Buddhi, which is often translated as intelligence, is rather a faculty capable of conceptual distinction of the kind, this is a pot, this is a cloth, and so on, and a faculty of volition. However, it looks like Indian philosophers hasn't endowed human with a specialized faculty dedicated to comprehending universals, ideas, the faculty which makes him akin to the higher level of existence. Certainly, in India, knowledge plays a crucial role. Sa vidya ya vimuktaye. Only that we can call knowledge which leads to liberation. However, here we try not just to point out the distinction between vidya and jnana, that is, distinction of true comprehension from mere knowledge of some kind of information. It seems that attainment of liberation in Indian culture inevitably involves some kind of insight into higher reality, which, even if it begins with reasoning based on ordinary logic, for instance, in Vedanta, we first receive information through hearing and take it for granted, Shravana, and when we reflect, then we reflect on it, Manana. But finally, we should end up with Nididhyasana level, or meditation, on the supernaturally given great sayings, Mahavakya. In Yogacara, after we adopt the elaborated intellectual theory, we should nevertheless practice a kind of Buddhist yoga. In other branches of Buddhism, we practice other certain meditation techniques. Patanjali says in the Yoga Sutra that one should actually eliminate the fluctuations of mind, achieve chitta vritti nirodha, because the nature of mind is fluctuation, in fact. Buddhism agrees with this and calls nirvana an extinction. If we would reason from a narrow-minded European-based perspective, this could seem to be a kind of elimination of consciousness itself. It seems that Indian philosophers claim the attainment of the high level of existence could be attained not through theorization or intellect, but rather through practical actions like various kinds of psycho practices. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Lev. Now, who are going to react to this presentation? What are the questions you want to ask our presenter? Do you hear me?
Маленький коммент. Можно маленький коммент сделать?
Yes, yes, Marietta Tigran.
Да.
Yes, you're welcome.
Да,
Marietta Tigran Stepanyansk.
Да, я думаю, я с большим интересом...
No, in English, please.
In English, yeah.
In English, yes.
Yes, I think the last two presentations, to my taste, were in particular interesting because they are could be in great help to those who are involved in intercultural philosophy and who are really interested to understand any other philosophy. I think that should be made a kind of perspective for for Russian philosophies to work on this comparison between terms which seems to be alike, similar, but when you look in depth, you find out that there is great difference. And that great difference prevents those who are in Western philosophy to understand, I would say to understand anything in Eastern and Indian philosophy in particular. Because if you don't understand the meaning of these terms and the difference in the essential meaning, you can't understand the conceptual differences between these philosophies. So I would welcome that, and I think it's necessary to publish these materials as the materials of the whole conference, because the translation of the Indian presentations, the full translation, would be very important. Because sometimes to understand English speaking Indians could be difficult, in particular if there are any difficulty in the sound of these presentations. And I think it's necessary to have the texts themselves so that to be able to understand the importance of these presentations. Unfortunately, and that should be kept in mind for the future, the Indian texts have been presented on screen with very small letters, and that made it difficult for those who have eye problem, like myself. I couldn't read them because my, the problems with eyes could be great difficulty. So I would suggest to have it in 14 or 12 size of the letters when we print it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Marietta Stepanias, for your comments. Please, we just have a look at the questions that the speakers, I address the speakers, have a look at the questions that were posed to you in the beginning, and let us start our discussion. Professor Gokhale, are you with us?
No, I don't have any questions now. I don't have any questions now.
Okay.
But may the speakers respond to the questions which I have already
Yeah. That is exactly that I have proposed to our speakers.
Okay.
We start with Madhumita. Madhumita, please. Where are you? Are you here, Madhumita?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, great. So your paper identifies a very significant paradigm shift between different forms of Buddhism, which we call Theravada and Mahayana Buddhist traditions, but the name Theravada is not very fortunate because it is only one school, as well as the name Hinayana, which is even less fortunate because the division, the classification between Mahayana and Hinayana is made in Mahayana. So it is a purely apologetic classification that we cannot use. But we are obliged to use for the lack of the better solutions of the problem. What do you think about that? Which term you prefer? You prefer Theravada? As classification term?
Actually, we are habituated with using the term Hinayana in contrast to the Mahayanas. But nowadays, since I had used the word Theravada to mean the school, actually, I know it very well that there are several schools of this Theravada tradition, but I actually use the term to signify that school where the main goal was the attainment of nirvana for oneself. Okay, so in that respect, all the schools agree. The difference among them was regarding which elements are to be accepted with a like between the Sarvastivadins and other traditions, so on. But because my concern here rather was to show that when I spoke about the Theravada tradition, my concern was to show that here all of them they were mainly concerned with soteriological issues, that is how to attain liberation or nirvana. That is the main question. And when they discussed about the metaphysical questions like whether time is real or whether all the objects exist or not. They were not much concerned with these questions because in their opinion all these issues, they are at the what shall I say, at the conventional level. So their main concern was only to the attainment of liberation. That is my question. But when even in the a case of Mahayana thinkers, for example, when I look at Nagarjuna's text, there are several texts by Nagarjuna. Let us first of all consider his main text, that is Mula Madhyamaka Shastra. There, in the different chapters, 24 chapters, he has taken up for discussion the different items which are admitted either by the realist Sarvastivadins or the different schools of Buddhism, or even the realists like Noyaikas and others, and he has refuted them, all of them, with the help of his Prasanga method. When we come to the text Vigraha Vyavartani, there also he is doing more or less the same thing. But in none of these texts he has presented any view of himself regarding whether knowledge, what does he mean by knowledge, and so on. On the other hand, when we look at his other works like Ratnavali, or even the Chatustabas, there we find that the goal there was not the refutation of any metaphysical theory, but rather showing how to lead a good ethical life, good moral life, and how to look at the ultimate reality. That is, my point was just to show that in the texts of Nagarjuna, we find here epistemology, metaphysics, all are dealt with separately. Whereas when we look at the text of Asanga, there we find, even in the Abhidharma Samuchaya or in the Mahayana Sutra Alankara or the Bodhisattva Bhumi, Yogachara Bhumi, etc., there we find that the goal is the attainment of the liberation, obviously, but there also the attainment of the how a bodhisattva is to lead a good life. And that is, it is soteriological. The objective is soteriological something. But in course of that, they have given us the epistemology, logic, and even in course of that, when he says that at the conventional level, when we are using language, we say that the object is this, is so and so and not that. That is which later on we find in the case of Dingaga Dharmakite as a kind of opohoda, that sort of idea was there. So this sort of epistemology, logic, this involvement together, this is, I think, the first time we find in the case of Asanga. And the question you asked, I might say that it is very much related here, because when we read Dharmakirti, for example, Dharmakirti's Pramana Vartika, there he deals with the question of epistemology or logic. It may be regarded as a text of epistemology and logic, but even there, at the core, he is trying to find out what is the reality. It is Bigopti Matrata, it is consciousness, and how that consciousness reveals itself, and why is it regarded as the ultimate reality? So, which is expressed in terms of Chitra Dvaitovada and so on. So, all these apparently, which seem to be not present, which seem to be separated, they are all intermixed. So, that is, we cannot separate the epistemology from the metaphysics, or none of them can be separated from their ethics or soteriology, ultimate goal of life. So this sort of comprehensiveness we find in the Yogacara tradition. That is, I feel that here this is the novelty, or this is the shift noticeable in the Mahayana tradition. So that is my observation.
Thank you. Professor Gokhale, what was your question to Madhumita? Please remind us your question or objection to Madhumita
No,
at the beginning.
Yes.
Could you remind it?
It was a general question about Yogacara analysis of consciousness, that on the one hand, they would start with rejection of external objects. That is, consciousness alone exists, mind alone exists. But then when they again analyze mind, in mind they observe subject-object duality. That is, even the constructing and the mind which constructs an unreal object, ultimately the object is unreal, but the mind itself has this duality. And that duality is not real, so that is to be rejected. And that consciousness, pure consciousness, then we will get something like pure mind, pure consciousness, without any object, without any consciousness of an object. Now, suppose, at times, Vasubandhu also says that is Buddha's knowledge, which is anabhilapya, which is inexpressible in words. Now, and Buddha is supposed to know everything. So, knowing everything and having knowledge without an object, these two things do not go together. So, I find a kind of mysticism in this Yogacara philosophy when it comes to the ultimate reality and knowledge of the ultimate reality. That is my...
I try to answer, and then I give the words to Madhumita, because I read a research on the subject on Sarvajña, how to understand this Buddha's knowledge of everything. Does it mean that he knows every fact, every circumstance, every event, or it means that he knows the gesture or the essence of all facts and events? There are two different perspectives. Yes. And it is the final, the second perspective, which is designated as Sarvajña of the Buddha, because Buddha himself, we know that he repeated in different occasions that he doesn't know how to get from the village A to the village B. he doesn't know this kind of things,
Mm-hmm.
but he knows how to proceed in
Yes,
general. And
yes.
it depends
Yes.
on the individual. If the individual has lost his way, it is his fault, not the Buddha's fault, because Buddha, he only he indicates the direction, the general direction, but
No, understand.
yeah.
Really understand, appreciate. Now, this is the conception of omniscience which is presented by Dharmakirti, mainly in Pramana Vartika, that he should not be understood as Sarvajna in the sense of who knows each and everything. But I am talking about the Yogachara approach, particularly Vasubandhu's approach. That is in Ushatika, at the end, he says, I have explained Vidyati Matrata according to my limited intellect, but Buddha knows the truth of it. And he knows means, according to him, Buddha is not that kind of Buddha, but Buddha's knowledge is anabhilapya, which is inexpressible, and so on and so forth. So there, I think there is some paradox that I find. Because I mean, the omniscience of the Buddha is understood in Buddhist literature in different ways, not always in the same way. That is, I think.
Yeah, I remember it. I was stricken by this very personal observation of Vasubandhu. Very modest observation. But excuse me, Madhumita, could you comment this?
Actually, I will have to think over it a little more. But regarding the last point that Professor Gokhale had asked, had commented, is that about Vasubandhu. Yeah, I think that when Vasubandhu says that this is what I found in my limited knowledge, and the else remains for a Buddha to know. There, we have in their works, we have two different ideas going on. Number one is Vasubandhu as a devotee of Lord Buddha. Okay, there he is treating Buddha as the Lord who is to be worshipped, who has all the who has all the qualities, supreme qualities in himself, and so on. But when in the logic, when through logic, he is trying to show that ultimately only consciousness remains, that consciousness is the only reality. There is not a devotee, he is a logician. And in similarly, in Dharmakirti's Pramana Vartika, when we find he using the term Bhagavan for Buddha, or in the sense of being omniscient, he does not mean by omniscient that that Buddha knows everything at every time. And this we find in different occasions also in the Nikaya text. But actually what is meant is that the distinction between the grahako and the grahyo, which are required for the conventional form of knowledge, it does not apply in the case of the ultimate knowledge. So in the ultimate knowledge, all the things are in the consciousness itself. It is consciousness makes it out of it, makes the grasp part, grahya part out of itself. So in that sense, consciousness is everything. Consciousness is the only reality. And the duality, they are not very much different. But I have to think of it in a better way. This is my first reaction.
Thank you. May I ask you, all of you, the other question concerning this very point of consciousness, which is everything, not everything, but consciousness is pure, it's free from subject-object opposition, etc., etc. How do you define this position in Western terms? There are different ways to define Buddhist perspective, like phenomenology, then idealism, and the main option is between phenomenology and idealism, but perhaps you have different ideas and perspectives on this query. What do you propose?
I couldn't follow your question, Victoria. Can you formulate it once more?
Yeah, the question is, how could we define Vasubandhu's position in Western terminology? Two terms have been already used. Phenomenology, it is a phenomenology, Buddhist phenomenology, or Buddhist idealism.
It cannot be regarded as totally idealism. It is rather, it is better to use the term phenomenology. That's my opinion.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Professor Gokhale, what do you think about this question?
No, on this question, I would just suggest that there is certainly a contrast between phenomenological approach and the Buddhist idealist approach, where ultimately consciousness is without subject-object duality, whereas for phenomenologists, consciousness is always consciousness of something. That is, the object element has to be there in the case of every consciousness. So that last step that these yogacharyas take, that ultimately this dvaya is something unreal, this step becomes problematic for the phenomenologists.
Yeah, thank you.
Isn't it, Victoria, why do you want to find the proper names in Western languages and Western philosophy terminology for Indian? Because I think if you any name, any similarity will be simplification.
Yes, of course, I understand that.
And
but, we have to
I am
refer to
very
it
much
somehow.
afraid that once
we have to refer
it,
to it somehow.
Yeah, idealism, it will be understood not as Indians understand. Phenomenology, it also will be. So it's better not to, to keep in mind that it is very, very different, and that is
okay.
Happen.
Yes, but in order to do intercultural philosophy, we have to understand each other better. And if we talk about Indian, especially Buddhist philosophy for Europeans, for the Western audience, we have to designate this position somehow. And sometimes it is designated as phenomenological position. Sometimes it is designated as idealism. What has happened? Oh, man.
We can hear you perfect. Go ahead.
Sorry, because my screen has changed suddenly.
I just want to add one point here. Can I?
Yeah, please.
No, I just wanted to tell you, continuing with what Professor Gokhale said, that traditionally we speak about Buddhist phenomenalism, not specifically phenomenology, phenomenalism. It's an epistemic. Buddhist phenomenalism versus Nyaya realism. So this has been going on in India for centuries. The debate was mainly between Nyayikas, the realists, and the phenomenalists, the Bauddhas. Yes, that's all that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. But I propose another term, internalism, which stresses, highlights the fact that internal experience, what's going in us, in our heads, is the most important starting point. So we can combine some terms to describe this phenomenon. I mean, the phenomenon of Buddhist philosophy. Unfortunately, my screen has drastically changed. I don't understand how could I return to.
You're clear with us. Please go ahead.
But I don't see anybody. Just a moment. I don't know what to do. Олег, у меня исчез экран. My screen has disappeared. У меня просто Zoom, слова Zoom и все, больше ничего нет. Как я могу вернуться? Здесь внизу тоже ничего. Так, сейчас, секунду. Ой, опять.
А что? В чем проблема?
У меня проблема. Так, я не могу. Так, сейчас, секундочку. I don't have the list of speakers. I don't know what to do with my screen. Anyway, you listen to me. Do you hear me?
Yeah, very well.
Yes.
Okay, if you hear me, let us continue. Who would like to participate in this little change of opinions on terms, on classification of Buddhist philosophy in European terms, or inventing some classificational terms, better classification terms than we have already in our use. Please take the floor. Professor Shrikala Nair, what is your opinion?
I did not have any questions during my presentation. Did you ask anything?
Sorry?
I did not have any questions soon after my presentation. Did you ask anything now?
Yes. I asked, you didn't hear. I asked about qualification term for Buddhist philosophy in the Western nomenclature. What is it?
Basta?
What is the better one? Idealism, phenomenalism, or epistemological idealism, or whatever. What can you suggest?
So you were asking me to place Buddhism, find the parallel streams of
from your position. Yeah, from your position, when you are speaking to European philosophers, to Western philosophers, and they will ask you, please explain us what is this philosophical Buddhist position in our terms. But how could you explain in what term you designate it?
See, I do not know. I really do not understand your question, but then very quick answer. See, there is subjective idealism in Madhyamakas. There is absolute idealism in Madhyamakas, subjective idealism kind of in Yogacara, and phenomenalism in the logical school of Buddhism, the Swatantra Vijnanavada. And what I was trying to do was I was trying to place
I see
and the insights in the cognitive studies, contemporary cognitive studies, where the embodied feature, embodied theory has been currently being employed, and how the Buddha's visions, insights on embodied theory, where the sensiblia has been a prominent factor in cognition, has been made the Vedana, which is called as the Vedana. The Vedana part is also the sensation has been taken significantly. Different from the classical version, where conceptualization has been given a prominence in epistemology. So keep the conceptualization away. That is, to experience is divine, to think is vulgar. I've said everything. Experience is divine, to think is bad. So this is the since classical Greek times, conceptualization has been taken overboard, and the experiential factor has been set aside. So this is the reversal, and this has been what the cognitive studies, empirical studies has been underscoring, where they were saying that experiential factors are to be given equal or even more prominence in the cognitive exercise.
I even read about such a term. I met such a term as experientialism as a general designation of Buddhism.
I was talking about this ball juggling and all that, where conceptualization stops, body starts thinking. Body is an independent agency which can think by itself, and which has been approved by the contemporary science as well. I don't know.
That is why it is important to have different options. To stress different points in Buddhism. So that was my idea of discussion. But let us turn to Professor Shrikala Nair topic and questions to Professor Shrikala Nair. What were the questions that you had from our speakers?
No, I did not get any questions. That's what I was trying to tell you, that I failed to gather any questions. There were no questions. Only you had asked me to find some Sanskrit terms, which you said subsequently you can do.
Just a moment. I noted some questions to you. Just a moment.
And it's too late.
Yes, I just a moment. Your paper suggests that signlessness and perfect science might be non-different according to Mahayana Sutra Alankara. I would like to ask you to expand on this paradoxical relationship a little bit more.
You're asking me?
Yeah, just
Mahayana Sutra
signlessness and perfect science. What is the difference or non-difference?
No, I'm not getting your question at all.
Oh, okay. Well, let us pass it.
Can you explain what she's asking? Pradeep ji. Professor Gokhale, can you explain what she's asking?
No, I'm not getting actually.
Okay. Perhaps I didn't hear something. Yeah. Unfortunately, when you presented your paper, your PowerPoint presentation didn't move.
That is right. Yeah.
It didn't move.
Yeah.
So
I realized that.
Yeah. But anyway, it would be interesting to know your opinion on other subjects of our discussion. What do you think about karmic perspective and its meaning for distinction between emotions and feelings, and other topics also could be discussed. If you have some questions to other participants.
Yeah, I have already placed my question to Minalji.
Yeah.
So probably she will answer me. when her time comes to. And I heard greatly, Kuntal Bhattacharya also spoke great. Yeah, they were, it was deep theoretical exercise, and she spoke about the validation of perception, which we were trying to discuss, me and Minal, which was later taken up by the next speaker. Anyway, Kuntala Bhattacharya. That is all. I have nothing much.
Okay, thank you. Then Professor Minal Katarnikar, what are your questions to us?
I got some question. Yeah, it was from Dr. Shrikala Nair.
Yeah.
She was asking about the I think norm of validity, whether it is pragmatic norm or what was the other one you suggested? Arthakriya-karitva or coherence?
Yeah. No, Minal, I'll explain. See, Ardhakriya-karitva is the test of validation, right?
Yeah.
Ardhakriya-karitva is the test of validation, and we all say that during postmodernity, like we are used to quick English translations. So we say that it is pragmatic theory that has been applied here. So I was just wondering, is it coherence or praxis? Because see, where probably Professor Gokhale also can help me saying that, see, they say that you have the previous experiences that has been stored in your mind. See, when the first moment has disappeared, and then you have only the class characteristics, which they call as the santana. So only the santanas are available, and your perceptual judgment is towards the santana, right? So where the Ardhakriya Karitva is referring to the santana that belongs to some entity in the class. So now Gangesha Ubadhyaya and all, where the Nayayikas were quickly asked them, saying that, oh, where did this class conception come to you? Because they were all against the class conception. Anyway, let that criticism stay. But my concern is it pragmatic theory or coherence theory that is in work? Is it clear? Is it the pragmatic theory or the coherence theory that is in function? In the Ardhakriya Karitva.
Yeah, but in the tradition, I'm sure Dr. Gokhale will certainly give his expert comment on this. But what I observe is, insofar as we go with the definition of pramana, non-contradiction, then we have to interpret the term non-contradiction as maybe not incoherent, isn't it? Pramanam avisamvadi jnanam.
Avisamvadi pravritti, right?
Yes. So is
that is pragmatic.
Not
that's pragmatic. Indications of pragmatic.
Is it pragmatic? It is. I think this is somewhere lies between the two. It's not mere pragmatic like that means as we understand the term pragmatic. So it lies between the two. On one hand, it is non-contradicted in the sense of maybe not incoherent. And in the other sense, it is leading to successful activity, Arthakriya Karitva. So it is somewhere lies between the two.
This is what I wanted to present before the scholarly community here. It is not pragmatism as we standardly translate. It is coherence and praxis, and it is a fine combination of both this. But due to an absence of right English term, we quickly come and dispose with it, and we say that, oh, it is pragmatic, which is, as Minal is right, and I also have a strong feeling that it is coherence. It's more of coherence than praxis, actually. It is more of coherence than praxis.
Yes. And I got one very interesting question from Professor Vikya only, that where would I place the systems of Indian philosophy into empiricist and rationalist divide that we understand as two camps in epistemology pertaining to knowledge. Am I right, Professor Victoria?
Yeah.
You had raised this query for my and I actually thank you for raising this question. It is because in Indian tradition, see, for the sake of convenience, we can understand the terms empiricism and rationalism in the way in which we understand them normally. But in Indian epistemology, we do not have this kind of two camps in Indian tradition like empiricism and rationalism. And how do we decide that? We decide that from the sources of knowledge that are accepted by the systems. And I'm sure with with inclusion of sophisticated lokayatas, all the systems of Indian philosophy, they have accepted both perception and reasoning as the important sources of knowledge. So it's not something that they are either empiricist or they are rationalist in the well accepted manners. Somewhere the divide between the schools would be their metaphysical connotations, that this is realistic epistemology and this is maybe idealistic or constructivist epistemology. And somewhere this is a feature of Indian epistemology, that they don't go in the binary understanding of knowledge, that there will be only empirical knowledge or then prominently empirical knowledge, or then there will be only rational knowledge or prominently rational knowledge. Such binaries we don't find in Indian epistemological understanding. The very important question for them would be what is the nature, what is the ontos of the object of knowledge? Is it independently real, or is it mentally constructed, or is it partly like Kantian model, whether it is partly constructed and partly given? And then we have all the three paradigms in Indian epistemology. So this empiricism rationalism divide would that means forcing this divide onto Indian epistemological schools would be treating will be like misinterpreting their epistemological theories. That is what I understand.
Yes, I agree with you. And I would like to stress one very important thesis of all Buddhist and non-Buddhist epistemological theories, is that pratyaksha is the basis of anumana. And that means that we cannot find pure rationalistic theories which state that reason is the main in understanding the everything, the objects, any questions. It is the reason which is the most important instrument to understanding of any subject proposed to our thinking. And in India, we have the priority of perception on which the anumana or inference is based. So we can say, if we use terminology of Western philosophy, that Indian philosophies are sensualists or they are empiricists. All of them. Because of this hierarchy of pramanas. You want to say something?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, because I don't see anybody. I don't see anybody, so I don't know who speaks.
Yeah. No, this is Meenal. I'm speaking.
Yeah. Okay.
If we describe all Indian philosophy as maybe empiricist, again, they are not empiricist in the maybe traditional sense, because they are not exclusively empiricist. Even though perception stands foremost in the hierarchy of pramanas, only to validate the pramanas, only to validate the other pramanas. But that doesn't mean that what the knowledge that we gain, knowledge of the world that we gain, can be derived only from perception. Other sources of knowledge are equally important, though for validating them we have perception. But that doesn't rule out the possibility, and that doesn't rule out the unique contribution of each and every other pramana as such. So calling Indian systems empiricists would be like, no, they are not empiricist in that sense of the term. I'm sorry.
I mean, only the hierarchy, the list of pramanas, the traditional list of pramanas, which begins with pratyaksha.
Yeah, I will have. That means quickly I will give you. May I take a minute? I'll give you quickly maybe some definitions of empiricism, rationalism in Indian tradition. Of course, for empiricism we have sense perception as the only source of knowledge that we find in the Lokayata system, that is Charvaka.
And it is a pure sensualism.
Yes, so they maybe, that means one variety of Charvakas could be called as empiricist in that sense. But for rationalist, there is a definition that these are the systems who accept the scriptures only if they conform to the logical reasoning. And they define, that means exegesis is defined, or exegetical schools are defined as those systems who accept the scriptures and interpret them with the help of logical reasoning. So according to rationalists, logical reasoning is superior to scriptural testimony, and according to exegetical systems, scriptures are superior to the logical reasoning. So the debate is not between whether perception is superior or not. That is accepted as that means a universal pramana, you can say. But if it is a debate between the scriptures and the reasoning, then the rationalists would say that reasoning is superior, and scriptures are accepted only if they conform to reasoning. And exegetical schools, hermeneutical schools will say that scriptures are supreme and they can be interpreted only with the help of logical reasoning. That's it. That means that is how the definitions of these terms in Indian tradition have been provided.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. But I can remind the earliest classification of brahmanas in the Buddhist tradition, which comprises also agama, the words of the Buddha. And this is also a problem if we take the Buddhist epistemological school. We have only two pramanas. But at the same time, we have the first chapter of Dharmakirti Pramanavartika dedicated to the Buddhas as a pramana. Buddha as a pramana. So it is a kind of agama. What do you think about this suggestion?
Looking at again, I don't know. That means whether this question is for me or other experts. There are many seniors.
For all of you, for all of you.
Yeah. I will give one quick response, and I would like to listen to Dr. Gokhale on this. But looking at the temperament of the development of Buddhist philosophy, Buddhism falls more in the category of logical or rationalist school as per the entire understanding. It's for maybe open or very open logical thinking rather than going for any testimony as such. So maybe later on we have acceptance of Tripitakas, but in literature, philosophical literature, we hardly see that kind of scriptural or maybe authoritative temperament of Buddhist tradition as such. That means third pramana, accepting scriptures as the third pramana, would not fit into Buddhist scheme of understanding knowledge and so on. This is my humble submission about it. But I would like to listen to Dr. Gokhale.
Thank you, Dr. Gokhale. We
I do
want to
agree.
know your opinion.
I do agree. And I mean, in West, when they distinguish between empiricism and rationalism, rationalists would say that the reason is as if an independent source of knowledge, irrespective of experience. This approach we don't have in Indian tradition at all, and therefore that particular distinction will not be applicable. But from that we cannot say that all our systems accept pratyaksha as the first pramana and therefore they are empiricists, because when they talk of reasoning, they accept that kind of reasoning which, although it is based on experience, it transcends experience and it tries to establish many non-empirical objects. Similarly, as Katarnikar has pointed out, when we talk of scriptures, whether scriptures are subject to examination through experience and reasoning or not, this is an important issue. And there, as she pointed out, Buddhists are for the possibility of examination of the scriptures, whereas particularly these Mimamsa tradition and this Vedic Dharma Shastra tradition, they would say that scriptures should not be examined, only they should be supported with the help of reasoning. So that is an important distinction. And I would also like to have a brief comment about the so-called, Avisamvadi, the discussion which took place earlier. Actually, Avisamvadi does not refer to coherence theory, because the cognition, according to Dharmakirti Pramana Vartika, Pramanam Avisamvadi Jnanam, this Visamvadi means which is non-discordant with the object and not with any other cognition. When you talk of, say, coherence theory, we are talking about one cognition should not be contradicted by another cognition. This type of approach we may find to some extent in Purva Mimamsa, where abadhitatva is one of the conditions of pramana. So one cognition should not be badhita, it should not be falsified by another cognition. This is the criteria which is very close to coherence theory. Whereas in Buddhism, I feel, in Dharmakirti, it is correspondence. And certainly it is not pragmatism in the strict sense of the term. But this correspondence is different from the correspondence of Nayayikas, because for Nayayikas, the reality consists of all these categories, and therefore Dharma-dharmi complex is the nature of the fact. And if in our cognition also there is parallel Dharma-dharmi combination, then we will say that the cognition is true cognition, otherwise we will say it is false cognition. But that idea of cognition having Dharma-dharmi complex and true is not there in Buddhism. But still it is correspondence with the object, which is of the nature of swalakshana. So swalakshana just causes akara in the cognition, and if that akara is in accordance with the object, then that cognition is true. So it is a correspondence, but of a different kind.
Yeah. Thank you very much for all this clarification. It shows that it is very important to be careful when we use terminology, either Western one or Indian one. We should be very careful, because there are many nuances, many aspects which should be distinguished and defined. Otherwise, we risk to miss the point.
Yes.
And that is why I think that our meeting and discussion of such points is the kind of making intercultural things in our days. And I hope that this first experience will give us the opportunity to reflect on the subject we have discussed and to enlarge in the future our collaboration and our online discussion. And I propose to the participants to send me their papers, because I think that all the papers were very, very interesting. And we will try to publish the papers in our peer-reviewed journal of questions of philosophy in Russian translation. So please just think about preparing your presentations in the form of paper. I will send you the reference to the journal. There are indications of how to proceed and how to prepare the paper for publication. Are you agree?
Yes.
Do you agree? Do you agree with me? Yeah. And I want to express my deepest gratitude to all of you for this very inspiring conversation, this discussion, and I hope to see you tomorrow because we have one more session on Indian philosophy in English. So welcome tomorrow to our next panel. Sorry?
Bye-bye.
Bye and thank you.
Yes. Bye.